This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've been sitting on this story for over 5 years now, wondering if I should even share it. Every time I try to tell someone, they either think I'm making it up or they get this uncomfortable look like they don't want me to continue, so I figured maybe writing it down here might help me process what happened. I still get nightmares about it. We bought this house in rural Pennsylvania back in 2017. It was a steal, like suspiciously cheap. But my husband Mark and I were excited because we'd been renting for years and finally had enough saved for a down payment. The previous owners had moved out suddenly, leaving some furniture behind, which was weird but convenient for us since we didn't have much. The house was built in the 1970s, 2 stories with a finished basement, set back from the road about a quarter-mile with some woods behind it. Pretty typical country house. The first time we walked through it, I remember thinking it felt a bit off, like that feeling when you think someone's watching you. But I brushed it off as nerves about making such a big purchase. We moved in on a Saturday in July. The first few days were normal, unpacking, arranging furniture, the usual stuff. Then I decided to paint the basement to brighten it up. That's when I found it. There was this section of wall behind where a bookshelf had been that had this black symbol, a pentagram about 2 feet across, painted directly onto the drywall. It wasn't like something a teenager would draw. It had all these little symbols around it that I didn't recognize. The paint looked old and faded in some spots, but weirdly fresh in others. I called Mark down to look at it. He just laughed and said previous owners must have been into some weird stuff and suggested we paint over it. So I did. 2 coats of bright white paint. Problem solved, right? 3 days later, I went down to the basement to do laundry, and my stomach dropped. The pentagram was visible again, not completely, but you could see it bleeding through the fresh paint like a shadow. I thought maybe I hadn't applied enough paint, so I did 2 more coats that evening. The next morning, it was back again, clear as day, like I hadn't painted over it at all. Mark said it was probably just the type of paint we used, so we went to the hardware store and got some heavy-duty primer designed to cover stains. I applied 3 coats of that, then 2 more coats of paint. It stayed covered for almost a week. Then one morning, I went down to grab something from storage, and there it was again. The pentagram was back, but this time it looked darker, more defined than before, like it was, I don't know, stronger somehow. That same day, I was cleaning out a kitchen drawer and found an envelope addressed to new homeowner tucked in the back. Inside was a handwritten letter from the previous owner that made my skin crawl. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I should have told the realtor everything, but I needed to sell quickly. The symbol in the basement, do not try to remove it. I made that mistake. I was into witchcraft, just experimenting really. I thought I was summoning something small, something I could control. I opened something that can't be closed. It started small, noises, things moving. Then it got worse, much worse. It wants attention. It feeds on fear. I'm so sorry. I showed Mark the letter and he laughed it off as someone trying to scare us, but I wasn't laughing because things had already started happening that I couldn't explain. It started with cabinets opening and closing on their own. I'd wake up in the morning to find every cabinet door in the kitchen wide open, even though I knew they were closed when we went to bed. Then came the footsteps, quick, running steps down the hallway upstairs when both Mark and I were downstairs. Our dog Buster would go nuts, barking at empty hallways. One night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of children giggling. We don't have kids. Our nearest neighbor is over a mile away. The giggling seemed to be coming from inside the walls, moving around the house. Mark started to get concerned when he experienced things too. He was in the shower when all his toiletries flew off the shelf at once. Not fell, flew, like someone had swept them off with their arm. Pictures would fall off walls for no reason. Not just slide off, they would launch themselves across the room. One of them hit Mark in the back hard enough to leave a bruise. Our dog refused to go into certain rooms and would just stand at the doorway barking. After about a month of this, Mark finally agreed we needed help. I was raised Catholic but hadn't been to church in years. Still, I called the local parish and explained some of what was happening. They sent Father Thomas, an older priest who specialized in house blessings. Here's the part that still gives me goosebumps. We hadn't told Father Thomas anything about the pentagram. Nothing. But the moment he walked into our house, he stopped, looked around and said, "There's something in your basement." He went straight downstairs without us leading him there, directly to the wall with the pentagram, which was now visible again, despite multiple attempts to cover it. He stared at it for a long time, then turned to us with this grim expression and said, "This is old magic, dangerous magic." Father Thomas performed a blessing on the entire house, spending extra time in the basement. He sprinkled holy water on the pentagram and recited prayers in Latin. The whole time, the temperature in the basement kept dropping until we could see our breath. When he finished, he told us the blessing should help, but wasn't a permanent solution. He said the symbol was an anchor for something that didn't belong in our world, and as long as it remained, there would be problems. For about 2 weeks after his visit, things were calmer. Not normal, but calmer. The cabinet stayed shut. The footsteps stopped. I thought maybe it was over. Then Mark's mom got sick and he had to fly out to Arizona with our son. I forgot to mention we have a 6-year-old, Ethan, to help her. I was supposed to go too, but I couldn't get the time off work. So for the first time since we'd moved in, I was going to be alone in the house for the weekend. The first night was fine. I stayed up late watching Netflix with Buster curled up beside me on the couch. Nothing weird happened. I went to bed around midnight, feeling silly for being nervous about staying alone. The second night is when it happened. I got home from work around 7, made dinner, and settled in to watch TV. Around 9, I started feeling watched. You know that sensation when someone's staring at you. It was like that, but more intense. Buster felt it too. He kept looking at empty corners of the room and growling low in his throat. I decided to go to bed early. I double-checked all the doors and windows, turned on every light as I went upstairs, and got into bed with Buster beside me. I left my bedside lamp on because, honestly, I was scared. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. The room felt wrong, cold. The air was heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. Buster was standing on the bed, his body rigid, hackles raised, staring at the corner of my bedroom. That's when I noticed it. The corner was dark, not just shadow dark, but impossibly, unnaturally dark, like a hole in reality. The darkness seemed deeper than it should be, like it was swallowing the light from my lamp. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The corner seemed to be pulsing, growing. I couldn't tell if it was actually moving or if my terrified mind was playing tricks on me. Buster started growling, a sound I'd never heard him make before, deep and primal. Then he barked once, twice, and lunged toward the corner. Mid-leap, he yelped like he'd been hurt and scrambled back onto the bed, whimpering and pressing himself against me. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the corner. The darkness receded slightly, but not completely. It shouldn't have been that dark, not with both my lamp and phone light pointing directly at it. I fumbled for the overhead light switch and flipped it on. The corner returned to normal, just walls meeting at a right angle. Nothing unusual. Buster was still trembling against me. I sat there for what felt like hours, every light in the room blazing, afraid to move. Eventually, Buster calmed down enough to lie down, though he kept his eyes fixed on that corner. I must have dozed off because I woke up to Buster's growling again. The lights were still on, but the corner was dark again, darker than before, and this time I swear I saw movement within it. Not a shape exactly, more like a shifting, like something was trying to push through. That was it. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and Buster's leash. I didn't even put on shoes, just ran downstairs in my pajamas, Buster right at my heels. We got into my car and I locked the doors, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I was backing out of the driveway, I looked up at my bedroom window. The entire window was black. Not dark like the lights were off, black like it was filled with ink, and I felt, I can't explain it properly, this overwhelming sense of hatred coming from it, like whatever was in there wasn't just haunting the house, it hated me, personally, viscerally. I drove to a 24-hour Walmart parking lot and stayed there until morning, Buster curled up in the passenger seat. I called Mark at dawn and told him everything. He flew back early with Ethan. We never spent another night in that house, all three of us together. I refused to stay there alone again. We tried to sell it, but nobody would buy it. We ended up breaking our mortgage and taking the financial hit just to get away. We live in an apartment now, in a different state. But sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night feeling watched. Sometimes I see shadows move in ways they shouldn't, and I still have nightmares about that corner, about the darkness that seemed alive. I don't know what was in our house. I don't know if we brought it with us when we left. All I know is that Pentagram was more than just paint on a wall, and whatever the previous owner let in is still out there. And sometimes when I'm alone, I swear I can hear children giggling in the next room. Story 2. I've never told anyone the full story before. I mean, parts of it, sure, but never everything from beginning to end. Even typing this makes my hands shake a bit. I guess I need to get it off my chest finally, even if no one believes me. I'm 23 now, but this started when I was just a little kid back in Chile. We lived in this old house with long hallways that always seemed darker than they should be, even during the day. I remember playing with my dolls in my bedroom when I first noticed him. A tall, dark figure standing at the end of the hallway, just watching me. I wasn't scared though, which is weird when I think about it now. Most kids would have screamed or run to their parents, but I actually invited him in. I'd wave and say, "You can come play if you want." I didn't know any better. My parents named him Steve as a joke at first. My mum would say things like, "Oh, Lydia's talking to Steve again," or "Steve must have moved the keys." They didn't take it seriously until later. When I was 5, we moved to Australia. I remember the flight being super long, and I kept telling my parents that Steve was coming with us. They just nodded and smiled. You know how adults are when kids talk about imaginary friends, but Steve wasn't imaginary, and he definitely came with us. The first really scary thing happened about a week after we moved into our new house in Australia. I went to the bathroom to wash my face before bed. I was leaning over the sink, frowning because I was tired and didn't want to go to school the next day. When I looked up at the mirror, my reflection was grinning back at me. Not just a small smile, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across my face. I blinked hard, thinking I was seeing things, and my frown deepened. The reflection's grin just widened even more, like it was pleased I'd noticed. My heart started racing, and I backed away slowly. The reflection moved with me, but it was still grinning while I was absolutely terrified. I bolted out of that bathroom so fast I nearly slipped on the tiles. I ran straight to my bedroom before realizing, shit, there was a mirror in there too. I slept in my parents' room that night. I told them what happened, but they just said I had an overactive imagination from the stress of moving countries. But I knew what I saw. Over the next few years, Steve made himself more and more known. He wasn't just a shadow in the hallway anymore. He'd appear as a solid black mass in doorways, blocking the entire frame. Sometimes I'd tap on the wall, and he'd tap back in the exact same pattern. He'd open and close doors when no one was near them. The lights would flick on and off by themselves. We'd hear footsteps upstairs when everyone was downstairs. The most disturbing thing was how he could imitate our voices. I'd hear my mum calling me from the kitchen, but when I'd go downstairs, she'd be outside gardening, or I'd hear my dad asking for help in the garage, but he'd be at work. It got to the point where we had to create a system. If someone called you from another room, you'd shout back, "Real person," and they had to respond with "real person" before you'd go to them. One night when I was about 12, I woke up feeling like someone was watching me. When I opened my eyes, I saw myself standing at the foot of my bed. It was my exact copy. Same pajamas, same hair, except the eyes were unnaturally wide, showing too much of the whites, and the irises were this sickly green color that seemed to be leaking, like green liquid dripping within the eyes. I couldn't move or scream. I just lay there, frozen, until it slowly backed out of my room. The next morning, I found green droplets on the carpet. Steve wasn't always scary though, which is the confusing part. When I was 16, I went through a really dark time. Depression hit me hard, and one day I wasn't thinking straight. I was walking home from school along this busy road, and I just stepped toward an oncoming car. I don't think I consciously wanted to die, but I wasn't fighting to stay alive either. Right as I started to fall forward, I felt these ice-cold hands grab my wrist and yank me back onto the sidewalk with incredible force. The car missed me by inches, horn blaring. When I turned around, no one was there, but my wrist had these dark hand-shaped marks on it for days. That wasn't the only time either. A few months later, I was crossing at a light when a car ran the red. I felt those same cold hands shove me hard from behind, pushing me out of the way. I fell onto the pavement and scraped my knees badly, but I was alive. When I looked back, there was nobody there. The most dramatic rescue happened when I was 19. I was waiting for a train, standing too close to the edge of the platform because I was trying to see if it was coming. Suddenly, these freezing cold arms wrapped around my waist and pulled me backward with such force that I fell on my back on the platform. Not even a second later, the train rushed by at full speed, right where I had been standing. If I hadn't been pulled back, I would have been hit for sure. The weird thing is, my mum was there that time. She saw me get yanked backward by something invisible. She helped me up, her face white as a sheet, and whispered, "It was Steve, wasn't it?" That was the first time she ever acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't making this all up. That night, she finally told me everything. Steve had been with us even before I was born. In our first house in Chile, my parents would see a tall shadow figure standing in the hallway. Our maid quit after seeing a man with bleeding green eyes in the laundry room. My grandmother refused to stay overnight because she said someone kept sitting on the edge of her bed. All this time, I thought Steve had attached himself to me, but he'd been with our family all along. My mum believes that mirrors are portals, and that's how Steve comes through. For a while, we covered all the mirrors in the house at night, but it didn't stop him. We tried cleansing the house with sage, getting a priest to bless it, even had some paranormal investigators come look around. Nothing changed. Steve has his moods though. Sometimes he gets aggressive. We'll hear this deep growling noise coming from empty rooms, scratching sounds on the walls. Objects will fly across the room or shatter without anyone touching them. During these episodes, I get this overwhelming feeling of dread and anger that doesn't feel like my own emotions. But then there are weeks where he's completely calm, almost protective. The house feels safer somehow, like having a guard dog you can't see. Last month, I was home alone and heard the front door handle jiggling. Someone was trying to break in. Before I could even react, there was this massive bang against the door from the inside, like something huge had slammed into it. Then came this inhuman growl that made the windows vibrate. The jiggling stopped immediately, and I heard footsteps running away. When I looked out the window, I saw two guys sprinting down our driveway. So that's my life with Steve, my not quite human housemate with green bleeding eyes who terrifies me one day and saves my life the next. Sometimes I catch glimpses of him in reflective surfaces, not just mirrors, but windows at night, the screen of my phone when it's off, even puddles after rain, just a flash of those eerie green eyes. My dad still thinks I've got an overactive imagination despite all the evidence. My mum believes Steve is some kind of guardian entity tied to our family, but honestly, I have no idea what he is or why he's attached himself to us. I've researched shadow people, demons, ghosts. Nothing quite matches what Steve is. The strangest part is that I've gotten used to him being around. When I moved into my own apartment last year, I was actually worried he wouldn't follow me. But 3 days after I moved in, I saw my reflection smiling at me while I was frowning, and I felt this weird sense of relief. I don't know if I'll ever understand what Steve is or what he wants. Sometimes I wonder if he's been watching over our family for generations, long before I was born. Other times, I'm terrified he's something darker, just waiting for the right moment to do something truly horrible. All I know is that he's still here. I can feel him watching me even as I type this. The room just got colder and my desk lamp flickered twice. That's his way of letting me know he knows I'm talking about him. I've learned to live with Steve's presence, but I still sleep with the lights on and avoid looking into mirrors for too long, because no matter how many times he's saved me, there's something deeply unsettling about those bleeding green eyes and the way he can wear my face like a mask. He's here right now. The temperature in my room just dropped about 10 degrees and I can see my breath. I probably shouldn't be sharing this. He doesn't like when I talk about him to others, but I needed to tell someone to know I'm not crazy. Wait, something just tapped on my wall 3 times. I should stop typing. If I acknowledge him, sometimes he leaves me alone. If I don't. Story 3. I've never been a believer in the paranormal. Growing up, I'd roll my eyes at ghost stories and change the channel whenever those ghost hunter shows came on. Science could explain everything, I thought. But what happened to me 4 years ago shattered that worldview completely, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. Back in 2018, I was dating this woman named Elise, who lived about 2 hours north of me in this rural area of Minnesota. She had this log cabin that she shared with her mom out in the woods. Beautiful place, but isolated. I didn't get up there too often because of the distance, maybe once a month if I was lucky. From the beginning, Elise had mentioned weird stuff happening at her house. She'd tell me about hearing footsteps in the living room above her basement bedroom at night, even when her mom was working overnight shifts at the hospital. She talked about knocking sounds that seemed to respond to questions. Like she'd ask, "Is someone there?" And there would be 2 knocks. Then, "Can you knock 3 times?" And sure enough, 3 knocks would follow. I'd always laugh it off. "Old houses make noise," I'd tell her. "It's just the wood settling or animals in the walls." She'd get this look on her face, not angry, just disappointed that I didn't believe her. In March of that year, I drove up to spend the weekend with her. It was still pretty cold out, and her mom had stocked the fridge with food before leaving for a 3-day trip to visit Elise's grandmother. We had the place to ourselves, which was nice. Elise's bedroom was in the finished basement. It was cozy, with these thick rugs covering the concrete floor and string lights hung around the ceiling. The layout was kind of weird, though. From her bed, you could see down this short hallway that led to the stairs going up to the main floor. That first night was normal. We watched movies, made dinner, had a few drinks, nothing unusual. We went to bed around midnight, and I fell asleep pretty quickly after driving all day and then hiking around her property in the afternoon. I woke up suddenly around 2:30 in the morning, that kind of jarring awakening where you're instantly alert but don't know why. The basement was dark except for this small nightlight in the hallway that cast just enough light to see outlines. Elise was asleep next to me, breathing deeply. At first I thought maybe I'd heard something, a branch hitting the window or a noise from outside. I lay there listening, but the house was completely silent. Then I had this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong, like when you know someone's staring at you. I turned my head toward the stairway, and that's when I saw it. A black silhouette of a man was peering around the corner at the top of the short hallway, just visible in the dim light. Not just a shadow, a distinct human shape. The upper body was leaning slightly into view, as if whoever it was didn't want to fully expose themselves but needed to look at us. I froze. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I opened them, the figure was still there, perfectly still, watching. This wasn't a dream. I was fully awake, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was real. The figure was solid black, like a void in the shape of a person. I couldn't make out any features within the silhouette. No eyes, no face, just this impenetrable darkness. For what felt like forever but was probably closer to a minute, it just stayed there, staring. Then, slowly, it withdrew around the corner, not walking away, just pulling back until it disappeared. I couldn't move. My whole body was tense, my breathing shallow. I wanted to wake Elise, but I was honestly too terrified to make a sound. What if it came back? What if there were more of them? I just lay there, staring at that empty hallway until I eventually closed my eyes, not out of courage, but pure exhaustion. I don't think I slept again that night. When morning came, I was groggy and on edge. Elise noticed right away that something was wrong. We were making coffee in the kitchen when I finally told her what I'd seen. Her reaction stunned me. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, that happens sometimes. Don't worry. They never come downstairs. They just watch." I nearly dropped my mug. "What do you mean they? And you're okay with this?" She shrugged like I was overreacting to finding a spider in the bathroom rather than a shadowy figure watching us sleep. "Mom says they've been here since before we moved in. They don't hurt anyone." I was still processing this when I noticed something move in my peripheral vision. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. This happened 3 more times while we ate breakfast, just flickers of darkness at the edge of my vision, always disappearing when I tried to look directly at them. Later that afternoon, Elise's mom called to check in, and Elise mentioned that I'd met one of the watchers. Her mom asked to speak to me. "So you saw them," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "They're curious about new people." "What are they?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "In Russia, we call them domovoi, house spirits. They protect the home and those who live in it. My grandmother taught me about them when I was a girl." Her voice was matter of fact, like she was explaining why she preferred a certain brand of coffee. "2 of them attached themselves to me years ago," she continued. "I don't know why. Maybe they like the energy I give off." Then she told me something that made my skin crawl. A few years back, her ex-husband had stayed at the house alone while she and Elise were away visiting family. In the middle of the night, he called her in a complete panic, screaming that 2 things were following him throughout the house. He described them as shadowy figures that would appear in doorways, watching him, then disappear when he turned on lights only to reappear in another room. He was so terrified that he drove to a hotel at 3 in the morning and refused to ever stay in the house again. "But they've never hurt anyone," she assured me. "They're protective, not malevolent." That didn't make me feel any better. I spent the rest of the weekend trying not to look into dark corners or empty doorways. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like there were eyes on me from every shadowed space. I broke up with Elise a few weeks later. I made up some excuse about the distance being too much, but the truth was, I couldn't handle going back to that house. The idea of those watchers observing me, following me with their eyeless gazes, it was too much. Fast forward to 2020. I'd moved on. Started dating someone new named Jamie. Things were going well, and I hadn't thought about the watchers in months. Jamie lived in this old Victorian house that had been divided into apartments. The top floor, which used to be the attic, had been converted into a cozy living space with slanted ceilings and dormer windows. One evening in October, we were hanging out up there watching TV when Jamie mentioned casually that the house had a dark history. "What kind of dark history?" I asked, feeling a familiar unease creeping up my spine. "Oh, you know, the usual old house stuff, 3 or 4 deaths over the years, including someone who hanged themselves right here in the attic." The air in the room suddenly felt different, heavier somehow. I tried to brush it off, but my eyes kept darting to the corners of the room. That's when I saw it. In the far corner, about 4 meters away, was a female silhouette. Unlike the watchers at Elise's house, this one wasn't just a blank shadow. I could make out the shape of a dress, and within the darkness of where its face should be were 2 pinpoints of light, eyes filled with unmistakable rage. Jamie must have noticed my expression because they followed my gaze and then jumped up with a gasp. "Do you see that?" they whispered. We both grabbed our phones and turned on the flashlights, pointing them toward the corner. The light revealed nothing but empty space, but the air there looked wrong somehow, distorted, like heat rising from asphalt. The temperature in the room plummeted. I felt something cold touch the back of my neck, like icy fingers tracing my skin. Jamie felt it too, a pressure on their shoulders pushing down. We bolted downstairs without a word, our hearts racing. Once we were in the living room, Jamie pulled out a bundle of sage from a drawer and lit it, then went back upstairs to cleanse the space while I waited below, still shaking. Whatever was up there didn't follow us down, and after Jamie finished with the sage, we didn't experience anything else that night, or any other night I stayed over for that matter. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The female silhouette I saw at Jamie's house was different from the watchers at Elise's. Different energy, different presence entirely, which means these things, whatever they are, exist in multiple places. They're out there, watching from the shadows, and most of us never notice them. Sometimes I still catch movement in the corner of my eye, or feel that unmistakable sensation of being observed when I'm alone. I tell myself it's nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me because of what happened. But deep down, I know better now. Sometimes when you feel like you're being watched, you are, and not everyone watching us is alive. Story 4. I still get goosebumps typing this out, but I need to share what happened to me. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar, or maybe writing this will help me process it somehow. I moved into this neighborhood about 5 years ago. It's an old repurposed Air Force base that was converted into civilian housing in the 80s. The rent was cheap, and I needed a place close to my new job, so I didn't think twice about it. My sister moved in with me to split costs while she finished college. Looking back, I should have paid attention to the weird vibe of the place. The houses all looked identical. Tan stucco exteriors with brown trim, like they were stamped out by some military cookie cutter. Everyone in the neighborhood had stories about strange things happening. Lights turning on by themselves, voices in empty rooms, that sort of thing. I brushed it off as people being dramatic or superstitious. The first few weeks were uneventful. Then the small things started happening. I'd put my keys on the counter, turn around to grab something from the fridge, and they'd be gone. I'd find them later in completely different rooms. The TV would turn on by itself in the middle of the night, always to static. My sister and I would joke about our ghost roommate, who couldn't decide what to watch. Then the shadow people started. I'd see them from the corner of my eye. Dark silhouettes standing in doorways or at the end of hallways. When I'd turn to look directly at them, they'd be gone. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, that the stress of the new job was getting to me. One morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I saw my sister walk past the doorway toward her bedroom. I called out to her, asking if she wanted some coffee, but got no response. A minute later, she came through the front door with grocery bags. My blood ran cold. I asked if she'd just been in the hallway, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She'd been out for the past hour. That was the first time I felt genuinely scared in that house. The worst part of the house was the main bathroom and the small hallway connected to it. It branched off from the main corridor, creating this little dead-end area that always felt wrong. The temperature was always a few degrees colder than the rest of the house. The light fixtures there would burn through bulbs twice as fast, and there was always this feeling of being watched. I tried to avoid using that bathroom when possible, but it was the only one with a shower. My sister never seemed bothered by it, which made me feel stupid for being so unnerved by a bathroom, of all things. Then came that Thursday night in October. It was around 11 at night, and I needed to shower before bed. My sister was staying at her friend's place to work on a group project, so I was alone in the house. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror above the sink, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that always came over me in that room. The shower started normally enough. I was trying to hurry, lathering shampoo into my hair with my eyes closed, when I heard it, a distinct knocking sound coming from inside the bathroom. 3 sharp knocks, like knuckles on wood. I froze, my eyes still closed, soap running down my face. I told myself it was just the pipes or the house settling. Then it came again. 3 more knocks, louder this time. They seemed to be coming from the medicine cabinet directly across from the shower. I opened my eyes and wiped away the soap, squinting through the steamy glass door. What I saw makes my heart race even now as I type this. The mirror above the sink had fogged up from the steam, except for a small section that looked like it had been wiped clean by a hand. And in that clear section, I could see a single black, slanted eye staring back at me. Not a human eye. It was completely black, with no white part, no eyelid, and most disturbingly, no surrounding skin. Just an eye floating in the clear patch of mirror. I screamed and stumbled back against the shower wall. The eye didn't blink or move. It just kept staring. I shut my eyes tight, convinced I was hallucinating. When I opened them again and looked at the mirror, the fog had covered the entire surface again. No clear patch, no eye. I finished my shower in record time, too terrified to close my eyes, even to rinse my hair. I kept expecting to see that eye again, but nothing happened. I practically leapt out of the shower, threw on my clothes without drying off properly, and ran to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I didn't tell my sister when she came home the next day. What would I say? I saw a floating eyeball in the mirror. She'd think I was losing it. Maybe I was. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, a trick of the light, my imagination running wild, stress-induced hallucination. For about a week, nothing happened. I started to believe I had imagined it after all. I still hated that bathroom, but I used it quickly and without incident. Then came the night that destroyed any hope that this was all in my head. It was around 2 in the morning. I'd fallen asleep watching videos on my laptop and woke up needing to use the bathroom. My sister was asleep in her room. The house was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stepped into the hallway and immediately felt that something was wrong. The air felt thick, almost sticky, and there was a smell, a putrid, rotten meat smell that wasn't there when I'd gone to bed. I should have turned around and gone back to my room. I should have woken my sister. Instead, I continued toward the bathroom, my curiosity somehow overriding my fear. As I approached the small hallway that led to the bathroom, I saw it. Standing there, blocking the bathroom door, was, I don't even know what to call it. A figure, roughly human-shaped but wrong in every possible way. It had no skin, just exposed, glistening red muscle tissue and visible tendons that shifted as it moved. Its hands ended in long black claws that scraped silently against the wall beside it. Its face was the worst part, those same slanted black eyes I'd seen in the mirror. But now I could see there were 3 of them, arranged in a triangle pattern where a normal face would have 2 eyes and a mouth. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. I just stood there staring at this skinless thing as it tilted its head at me, like it was curious. Then it raised one clawed hand and pointed directly at me. Somehow I managed to back away, never taking my eyes off it until I reached my bedroom door. I fumbled for the handle, pushed my way inside, and slammed the door shut, locking it. Almost immediately, there was knocking. 3 sharp knocks, just like I'd heard in the bathroom. "Go away," I whispered, my voice shaking. 3 more knocks, louder this time. "Leave me alone," I shouted, surprising myself with the volume and force of my voice. The knocking stopped. I heard something like a sigh, then nothing. I sat with my back against the door until morning, too terrified to move or sleep. When daylight came, I cautiously opened my door. The hallway was empty. The smell was gone. I rushed to my sister's room and woke her up, finally telling her everything. She looked concerned but didn't seem to believe me, suggesting maybe I'd had a particularly vivid nightmare or sleep paralysis episode. I was beginning to think she might be right until the bathroom incident 3 days later. It was late, around midnight. My sister had gone to bed early with a migraine. I'd been putting off showering all day, but I couldn't avoid it any longer. I checked the bathroom thoroughly before getting in, behind the shower curtain, inside the medicine cabinet, even under the sink. Nothing out of the ordinary. I got into the shower, and about 2 minutes in, the lights went out. Just in the bathroom. I could see light still coming from under the door from the hallway. I froze, soap in my hair again, water running down my face. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid immediately afterward. What was I expecting? A friendly response. The bathroom was pitch black. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but I could feel something, a change in the air pressure, like when someone enters a room, and then breathing. Not my own. It was coming from right behind me inside the shower. I could feel warm breath on the back of my neck and shoulders. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The breathing got heavier, raspier. I squeezed my eyes shut, irrationally thinking that if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. Then, as suddenly as they'd gone out, the lights came back on. The mirror across from the shower was completely clear of fog, despite the steam filling the room, and in that mirror, I could see it standing directly behind me. The skinless thing, its 3 black eyes fixed on my reflection. Its mouth, which I hadn't noticed before, appeared to be sewn shut with thick black thread, but it was somehow still breathing heavily through it. One of its clawed hands was hovering just inches from my neck. I screamed and spun around, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, I saw only myself, soaking wet, shampoo running down my face, eyes wide with terror. I didn't bother turning off the water or grabbing a towel. I ran, naked and sopping wet, to my bedroom and locked the door. As I stood there, dripping on the carpet, I heard it, a deep, high-pitched laugh that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, followed by the distinct sound of the bathroom door closing. I moved out of that house 2 weeks later. My sister thought I was overreacting, but she didn't argue when I said I couldn't live there anymore. I've encountered the skinless thing several more times since that night in the shower, but never as terrifyingly close as then. I've learned certain things seem to keep it at bay. Salt lines at doorways, keeping lights on, never acknowledging its presence directly. I still don't know what it was or why it targeted me. I've searched online for similar experiences, found some vague references to skinwalkers or flayed ones in various mythologies, but nothing that exactly matches what I saw. Sometimes I think I see those black slanted eyes watching me from crowds or dark corners. Sometimes I catch that rotten meat smell on the wind, and every time I step into a bathroom, I check the mirror first, terrified of seeing that clear patch with an eye staring back at me. I don't know if I'll ever be free of it, or if it's just waiting for the right moment to finish whatever it started in that house. All I know is I'll never feel completely safe in a bathroom again. Story 5. I've been hesitating to post this for years. I'm not sure if writing it down will help, or just make the memories more vivid, but I need to tell someone who might understand or have experienced something similar. I grew up in a small town in the Harz Mountains of Germany. If you know anything about this region, you probably know about Walpurgisnacht, April 30th, the night when witches supposedly gather at Hexentanzplatz, the witches' dance floor, to meet with the devil before May Day. My town takes this stuff seriously, not in a modern Halloween party kind of way, but with a deep connection to traditions that go back centuries. As kids, we grew up with these stories. My parents weren't particularly superstitious, but everyone participated in the celebrations. There were bonfires, people dressed as witches, dancing, music, the whole town transformed for one night. Looking back, I think being raised with these traditions made me more receptive to what happened. When you grow up hearing about witches flying on broomsticks to dance with Satan, some part of you always wonders if there's truth behind the folklore. Everything started when I was 11. My aunt visited from Dresden and brought us a souvenir, a witch doll hanging on a broomstick. It wasn't particularly scary looking, just a typical witch with green skin, a black pointed hat, and a little cackle-like smile. The way it was attached to the broomstick made it look like it was floating. My mom thought it was cute and hung it at the entrance to my bedroom, which was under the stairway. I didn't think much of it at first. Our house was this old 2-story stone building that had been in my father's family for generations. My bedroom was on the ground floor, tucked away under the wooden staircase that led to my parents' and sister's rooms upstairs. It was cozy, with a walk-in closet that had once been a small pantry. About 2 weeks after we got the doll, I was lying in bed one night, almost asleep. It was late spring, just after Walpurgisnacht celebrations had ended for the year. My window was cracked open, and I could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside. Our house backed up against the forest. and on quiet nights you could hear all sorts of nature sounds. That's when I first heard it, a strange mechanical sound coming from upstairs, from the direction of my parents' bedroom. It wasn't footsteps, it sounded like something on wheels, but not smooth rolling, more like a jerky, irregular movement, like something being dragged, then pushed, then dragged again. I remember my heart starting to pound. I told myself it was just my parents moving furniture or something, but it was past midnight. They were usually sound asleep by then. The sound moved across the ceiling above me, then to the top of the stairs. Then it started coming down, step by step. With each movement, the sound got louder, and there was something else, a voice, not speaking words exactly, but making sounds like robotic speech that I couldn't understand. It was high-pitched and distorted, like someone talking through an old radio with bad reception. I was completely frozen. I wanted to call out to my parents, but I couldn't make a sound. The mechanical noise reached the bottom of the stairs, right outside my room. Then it stopped. For what felt like forever, there was complete silence. Then whatever it was started moving again, coming into my room. I pulled my blanket over my head, squeezing my eyes shut. I was shaking so badly that the bed frame was rattling slightly. The thing stopped at the foot of my bed. I could feel its presence, a cold heaviness in the air that made it hard to breathe. Through the blanket, I heard a single word spoken clearly. So. Just that. So. In a woman's voice that was somehow both ancient and mechanical at the same time. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. I don't know where I found the courage, but something in me needed to see what was there. Maybe it was the desperate hope that it was just my sister playing a prank. I lowered the blanket just enough to peek out with one eye. What I saw still haunts me. It was shaped like a woman, but not quite human. It looked like the witch from the doll, but life-sized and semi-transparent. She was floating a few inches off the ground, her feet not quite touching my bedroom floor. She wore a black dress that seemed to move even though there was no wind in my room. Her face was greenish-gray and wrinkled, with a long, hooked nose and eyes that glowed faintly yellow in the darkness. Her mouth was frozen in that same cackle-like smile as the doll. She wasn't looking directly at me at first. Her head was tilted, as if she was listening for something. Then slowly she turned to face me. Our eyes met, and I felt a cold that went beyond physical sensation, like something was reaching inside me and freezing my thoughts. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stared at her and she stared back. Her eyes didn't blink. They just glowed steadily in the darkness of my room. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, she turned away. She floated across my room toward my walk-in closet. The door was partially open, and she drifted through the opening. As she entered the closet, her form seemed to become less solid, more like smoke or mist. I watched as she gradually dissipated until there was nothing left but shadows. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay there, blanket pulled up to my chin, staring at the closet door until morning light crept through my window. When my mom came to wake me for school, I was still wide awake, exhausted and terrified. I tried to tell her what happened, but I could see she didn't believe me. She checked the closet, looked under my bed, and assured me it was just a nightmare. My dad was even less sympathetic. He said I needed to stop reading scary stories before bed. The witch doll was still hanging where it always was, looking completely innocent in the daylight. For weeks after that, I begged to sleep in my parents' room or my sister's room. Sometimes they let me, but most nights I had to stay in my own bed. I kept my closet door firmly shut and locked at night, with a chair propped against it for good measure. I asked my mom to take down the witch doll, but she said I was being silly and that it was just a cute souvenir. I started to think maybe they were right. Maybe it had been a nightmare or my imagination. Kids have vivid dreams, right? But deep down, I knew what I'd seen was real. Then, about 4 years later, my sister had an experience that confirmed everything. My sister is 5 years older than me, and she'd always been the skeptical type. When I was 11 and terrified, she was 16 and thought I was just being a dramatic little kid. She'd tease me about being afraid of a doll and make witch noises outside my door sometimes just to freak me out. By the time I was 15, I had mostly convinced myself that what I'd seen was some kind of sleep paralysis or night terror. I still kept my closet door shut at night, but I'd stopped being actively afraid. The witch doll was still hanging in the same spot. My mom liked it and refused to move it, despite my occasional requests. That summer, we had relatives visiting from out of town. My sister gave up her room for our aunt and uncle and was supposed to sleep on the couch in the living room. After the first uncomfortable night on the couch, she asked if she could sleep in my room instead, since I had a trundle bed that pulled out from under mine. I was hesitant, but agreed. I didn't tell her why I was nervous about sharing my room. I didn't want her to start teasing me again about the witch incident from when I was younger. The first night was fine. We stayed up late talking and nothing unusual happened. The second night, though, everything changed. We went to bed around 11. I fell asleep quickly, tired from a long day of showing our relatives around town. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by my sister grabbing my arm. Her grip was so tight it hurt. "Elias," she whispered, her voice shaking. "There's someone in the room." I sat up, instantly alert. The room was dark, except for the faint glow from my digital alarm clock. "What? Where?" I whispered back. "By the closet," she said. I think I saw." She couldn't finish the sentence. I looked toward my closet. The door was closed, just as I'd left it before going to bed. But there was something different about the darkness in that corner of the room. It seemed deeper, more concentrated. As we watched, the darkness shifted. It took shape. The same shape I'd seen 4 years earlier. The witch. This time, she didn't move around the room. She just stood there, half-formed in the shadows, watching us. Her yellow eyes were fixed on my sister now, not me. My sister was crushing my arm in her grip. She was breathing so fast I thought she might pass out. I wanted to turn on the light, but I was afraid to move, afraid that any movement might provoke the figure to come closer. We sat there frozen for what must have been 10 or 15 minutes. Eventually the shape began to fade, becoming less distinct until it was just ordinary darkness again. Neither of us slept after that. We turned on all the lights and sat on my bed, backs against the wall, until morning came. We didn't talk much. My sister just kept saying, "That wasn't real, that couldn't be real," but I knew it was, and now, so did she. At breakfast, my sister was pale and quiet. When our mom asked if she was feeling okay, she just nodded and said she hadn't slept well. Later, when we were alone, she pulled me aside. "What I saw last night," she said, her voice low and serious. "Is that what you saw when you were 11? I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me it was that bad?" she asked. "I tried," I said. "Nobody believed me." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she finally said. "I would have thought I was dreaming if you hadn't seen it too. It wasn't human, Elias." That night, my sister slept in the living room despite the uncomfortable couch. The day after our relatives left, my mom found the witch doll in the trash. I had thrown it away, hoping that might help. She was annoyed but didn't put it back up. We never told our parents what happened. What would we say? That the souvenir witch doll had somehow summoned a real witch into our house? They would have thought we were making it up or playing a prank. I moved out a few years later for university and rarely went back home after that. My sister did the same. Our parents still live in that house, and as far as I know, they've never experienced anything unusual. Maybe whatever it was only showed itself to children, or maybe it was tied to that doll and left when I threw it away. I'm 30 now, living in Berlin, far from my hometown and its Walpurgisnacht celebrations. But every year on April 30th, I make sure I'm not alone in my apartment. Some part of me is still afraid that she might come back, that she might find me again, and I still can't sleep with my closet door open. I don't have an explanation for what my sister and I saw. Was it really a witch, a ghost, some manifestation of the folklore we grew up with? I don't know. But it was real. It happened. And sometimes on quiet nights when the wind sounds just right outside my window, I think I hear that mechanical movement again, and my heart starts racing just like it did when I was 11. Story 6. I never believed in ghosts until I started working at that Dunkin' Donuts. It wasn't even an old building with some tragic backstory, just a relatively new store plopped in the middle of a shopping plaza parking lot. Nothing special about it, just donuts and coffee, right? Wrong. The first time one of my co-workers mentioned something weird happening, I laughed it off. Megan was telling me how she'd hear footsteps when nobody was there, or how things would move around overnight. I thought she was just trying to freak me out since I was new. I figured it was just the usual workplace BS, veterans messing with the newbie. I'd worked retail before, and there was always someone trying to convince you the store was haunted. Whatever, Megan, I told her. Save the ghost stories for Halloween. I'd been working there for about 3 weeks when I had my first experience. It was a Tuesday night, and I was closing with Jake. The store closed at 10, and we were doing our final cleanup, mopping floors, washing dishes, restocking for the morning crew, nothing out of the ordinary. I was in the back washing dishes when I heard it. Loud, aggressive banging on the back door, like someone was hitting it with their fist, followed by the doorknob rattling violently. Jake was next to me and we both jumped. "What the hell?" I said, nearly dropping the tray I was washing. "Probably someone hoping we'll give them the leftover donuts," Jake said, though he looked uneasy. "We should check." Jake walked over and opened the door while I stood behind him, a bit nervous. The door opened to nothing. Just the empty parking lot with the security light flickering overhead. Jake stepped outside and looked around. I followed him. "There's no way someone could have knocked and disappeared that fast," I said. "We're in the middle of a freaking parking lot. There's nowhere to hide." We both scanned the area, but there was absolutely no one there, not even a car driving away. Just empty asphalt stretching out in all directions. "Weird," Jake muttered. And we went back inside, both of us a little freaked out. "So, about those ghost stories Megan was telling," I started. Jake just shook his head. "Let's just finish up and get out of here." After that night, I started paying more attention to the strange things that happened in that store. I wasn't looking for proof of ghosts or anything. I was actually trying to find logical explanations for what people were experiencing. Drafts causing doors to close, the building settling, noisy pipes, that kind of stuff. But then things started happening to me that I couldn't explain away. About a month after the knocking incident, I was closing again, this time with my manager, Sarah. She'd gone up front to count the register while I cleaned the back area. I was alone, wiping down the prep table when I heard someone say, "Hey, Rissa." I froze, not because someone had spoken, but because of what they'd called me, Rissa. It's a nickname only my dad uses. Everyone at work knew me as Clarissa. No one there had ever called me Rissa before. I spun around, expecting to see Sarah or maybe another co-worker who'd snuck in the back door, but there was no one there, just me and the humming refrigerators. "Sarah?" I called out. "Yeah?" she yelled back from the front. "Did you just call me?" "No, I'm still counting." "Why?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "No reason," I said, but my hands were shaking as I went back to cleaning. The incidents kept happening, getting more frequent and harder to explain. One morning, Megan and I were opening together. We were getting everything ready when we both distinctly heard our co-worker Tanya talking. It sounded like she was giving a customer their order, the exact way she always did it, with her characteristic, "Have a great day now," at the end. Megan and I looked at each other, confused. "Is Tanya here today?" I asked. "No, she's off until Thursday," Megan replied, her eyes wide. We both walked to the front counter, but there was no one there. No Tanya, no customer. Just an empty store that wasn't even open yet. "You heard that too, right?" I asked Megan. She nodded, looking pale. That was definitely Tanya's voice. Speaking of Tanya, she had her own experience a week later. She was helping a customer at the drive-thru when suddenly she went completely white and dropped the headset. I was nearby making drinks and rushed over to see what was wrong. "Tanya, are you okay?" She just stood there, tears welling up in her eyes. I took over the drive-through while my manager pulled her aside. Later, when things had calmed down, Tanya told us what happened. "I heard my grandmother," she said, her voice shaking. She whispered right in my ear, clear as day. Called me Little Butterfly. That was her nickname for me. She's been dead for 3 years. The way Tanya described it, the feeling of breath on her ear, the unmistakable voice, made my skin crawl. She wasn't making it up. She was genuinely terrified. But the worst incident, the one that finally convinced me beyond any doubt, happened about 2 months after I started working there. It was a Friday night, and I was closing with Danny. We'd locked the front doors at 10, put all the chairs upside down on the tables, standard closing procedure, and were cleaning up. I was wiping down the front counter and Danny was mopping the floor near the bathrooms. Then we both heard it, the electronic ding that sounds whenever someone opens the front door. We both looked up automatically, then at each other. "Did you lock the doors?" Danny asked me. "Yeah, I definitely did," I said. "I checked them twice." We both moved toward the front of the store. The doors were still locked. No one had come in. But that sound was unmistakable. We'd heard it hundreds of times during our shifts. "Maybe it was just a glitch," Danny suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. We went back to cleaning, both of us a little on edge. About 5 minutes later, there was a loud crash from the dining area. We both jumped and ran over to see what had happened. One of the chairs had fallen off a table, just one, right in the middle of the dining area. "Did you put that one up?" Danny asked. "I put them all up," I said. "And even if I didn't set it right, why would it fall now? We haven't been near it." Danny shrugged, trying to act casual, but I could tell he was freaked out. "I'll put it back," he said. But I was done taking chances. "No, just leave them all down. Let's just finish and get out of here." I went around and took all the chairs off the tables, setting them properly at each table. Danny continued mopping and I went back to wiping down the counters. We were both working faster now, wanting to get out as soon as possible. About 10 minutes later, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a chair being pulled out across the floor, that screeching noise of metal legs against tile. I looked up to see Danny standing frozen, mop in hand, staring at something in the dining area. I followed his gaze. One of the chairs, the same one that had fallen earlier, was pulled out from its table. Not just a little bit, like it might have been positioned awkwardly. It was pulled all the way out, like someone was about to sit in it. Danny and I locked eyes. Neither of us had been anywhere near that area. "I'm not staying here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Danny nodded. "Grab your stuff. I'll text Sarah and tell her we had to leave." We left most of our closing duties unfinished. I didn't even bother to clock out properly. I just grabbed my purse and jacket and practically ran to my car. Danny was right behind me, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if expecting to see something following us. The next day, Sarah was surprisingly understanding. Apparently, she'd had her own experiences in the store and didn't blame us for leaving. "Just don't make a habit of it," she said, but I could tell she was rattled by our story. I kept working there for another few months, but I never closed alone, and I always tried to be out of there before dark. The weird occurrences continued, unexplained noises, items moving, the feeling of being watched. Once, all the straws flew out of the dispenser when no one was near it. Another time, the blender turned on by itself when it wasn't even plugged in. I still have no idea what was haunting that Dunkin' Donuts or why. It wasn't built on an old cemetery or the site of some tragic accident. It was just a normal building in a normal shopping center, but something was definitely there with us, making itself known in ways that couldn't be explained away. I quit about 6 months after I started, told them I needed to focus on school, which wasn't entirely a lie. But the real reason was that I couldn't take the constant dread of going to work, never knowing what weird thing might happen next. The strangest part, when I went back as a customer a few months later, everything seemed normal. I asked my old manager if the weird stuff was still happening, and she just gave me this look and said, "You know we don't talk about that with customers." So whatever it was, it's still there, still pulling out chairs and calling people's names and knocking on doors when no one's there. I don't know if it's dangerous or just mischievous, but I'm glad I don't have to deal with it anymore. And yeah, I get my coffee somewhere else now. Story 7. I never believed in ghosts until I moved into this place. That sounds like such a cliche, I know, but it's the honest truth. I bought my condo in the historic district of Millfield 5 years ago, thinking I'd scored an incredible deal. The place was built in the late 1800s and had been converted into condos in the 1980s. The original hardwood floors, high ceilings, and those gorgeous bay windows were what sold me. Now I realize why it was so affordable. The first few weeks were fine, just the usual stress of moving and getting settled. Then the little things started happening. At first, I brushed them off. A misplaced set of keys, the feeling of being watched, cold spots in certain areas of the apartment, normal old building stuff, right? By month 3, it was impossible to ignore. I'd be sitting on my couch watching TV, and suddenly my kitchen faucet would turn on full blast, not dripping, full-on running water. The first time it happened, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned it off, checked the pipes, even called a plumber who found absolutely nothing wrong. 2 days later, it happened again. Then came the dryer incidents. I'd put clothes in, start a cycle, and leave the laundry room. Minutes later, I'd hear the distinct sound of the dryer door swinging open every single time. I started duct taping the door shut, but somehow it would still manage to open. I've gone through more rolls of duct tape than I care to admit. My kitchen became a hotspot. Utensils I'd carefully placed on the counter would suddenly fly off and clatter to the floor. Not fall, fly, as if someone had swept them off with an arm. I've seen knives slide across the counter by themselves, stopping just at the edge. My friends noticed it too. Megan was the first to refuse to stay overnight. She'd been my go-to person for movie nights, but after spending the night and waking up to find all the kitchen cabinets wide open, cabinets I distinctly remember closing before bed, she made her excuses. Now she only visits during daylight hours and never alone. Even my dad couldn't handle it. When I had to travel for work for 6 months, he agreed to rent the place from me. He's the most practical, level-headed person I know, a former Marine who doesn't scare easily. Yet 3.5 months in, he called to tell me he was moving out. Just like that. When I returned, I found most of his boxes still packed in the spare room. He hadn't unpacked a single thing besides essentials in all that time. When I asked him why, he just shook his head and said, "You know damn well why, Rachel." I do know why. I'm what some people call sensitive. I can sense presences that others might miss. And in this condo, I've identified at least 6 permanent spirits. There are others that come and go, but these 6 are fixtures. Each has their own personality, I guess you could say. There's one that stays in the hallway outside the bathroom. It never enters, just lingers there, watching. I feel it most strongly when I'm showering. Another haunts the kitchen. That's the one with the utensil fetish. The living room has a female presence, generally calm but occasionally prone to turning the TV on in the middle of the night. The worst is the one in my bedroom closet. It radiates a cold, angry energy that sometimes makes it hard to sleep. I've tried everything to get rid of them. I've had the place blessed with holy water. I've burned sage until my neighbors complained about the smell. I've used Palo Santo wood, crystals, salt barriers. You name it, I've tried it. Nothing works. At best, things quiet down for a few days before starting up again, often worse than before. Last month, things escalated in ways that have me truly terrified. My boyfriend Mark was staying over. He's one of the few brave souls who still will. We were half asleep when we both distinctly heard a male voice say, "Hello there," clear as day, right between us in the bed. Mark shot up, turned on the lights, and we searched the entire condo. Nothing. He wanted to leave immediately, but I convinced him to stay. We barely slept that night. The voice has become a regular occurrence. Sometimes it's in my dreams, but increasingly, it's when I'm wide awake. It's always the same voice. Deep, slightly raspy, with what sounds like an old-timey accent. It doesn't just say hello anymore. Sometimes it comments on what I'm wearing or doing. That blue looks nice on you. Or reading again tonight. It's like living with an invisible roommate who doesn't respect boundaries. Speaking of boundaries, this is the part I'm not comfortable talking about, but I need help. About 2 weeks ago, I was in bed reading when I felt something touch my leg. Not the usual cold spot or the feeling of being watched, an actual physical touch, like fingers trailing up from my ankle to my knee. I jumped up and turned on every light in the place, but of course, I was alone. Since then, it's happened several more times, and the touches have become more intimate. I'll be in the shower and feel hands on my back. I'll be cooking and feel something brush against my hip. Last night, I woke up because I felt what I can only describe as a hand caressing my face. I lay there, paralyzed with fear, feeling the distinct sensation of fingers moving from my cheek to my throat. I know how this sounds. Trust me, I've questioned my own sanity multiple times, but I know what I'm experiencing is real. The physical interactions are new and completely different from the grabbing at my ankles that I've somewhat gotten used to over the years. Those grabs always felt desperate, like something trying to get my attention. These new touches feel deliberate and personal in a way that makes my skin crawl. You might be wondering why I don't just move out. Believe me, I've considered it. The problem is financial. I got this place at such a good price that my mortgage is ridiculously low, less than half of what I'd pay in rent anywhere else in this area. I'm planning to move out of the country in 3 years for work, and I can't justify throwing away money on a new place when I've already invested so much here. Plus, in this market, who knows if I'd even be able to find something affordable. My neighbors know about the haunting. Mrs. Abernathy from across the hall once saw my front door open and close by itself when she was walking past. The couple downstairs have heard footsteps and dragging sounds from my unit when I was out of town. When I asked them to check on my cat while I was away last Christmas, they flat out refused, said they'd feed her at my door but wouldn't step foot inside. I didn't push it. Last week I tried to record some of the activity. I set up my phone to take video while I slept. Most of the footage showed nothing, but around 3:15 in the morning, there's a clear dip in the mattress next to me, as if someone sat down. The sheets move slightly, conforming to an invisible weight. When I saw that, I almost packed a bag and left. But where would I go? The touching has been getting worse each night. Yesterday I felt something grab my wrist while I was washing dishes. The grip was so tight it left marks, actual physical red marks that I photographed before they faded. I've started sleeping on the couch with all the lights on, but even that doesn't help. Last night I felt something stroke my hair for nearly an hour as I pretended to be asleep, too terrified to move. I'm at my breaking point. I've tried communicating with whatever this is, asking it to stop, to respect my space. Sometimes it seems to listen. Things will calm down for a day or two. Then it starts again, always escalating, always pushing further. I've considered renting the place out like my dad did, but I can't in good conscience subject someone else to this. Besides, how would I even advertise it? Charming historic condo, great location, comes with 6 ghosts, one of which might get handsy. Last night was the worst yet. I woke up around 2 in the morning to find myself completely unable to move. Sleep paralysis, I thought at first, but then I felt the mattress shift and a weight pressed down on top of me. I could feel breath on my face, actual warm breath. I tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, it suddenly released me. I grabbed my car keys and sat in my car until morning. I'm writing this from a coffee shop because I can't bring myself to go home yet. I don't know what to do. I can't afford to move, can't stay with friends long term, and can't keep living like this. The one entity that's become physical seems to be getting more confident, more invasive each day. What happens next? How far will it go? I'm terrified to find out, but I don't see any way out of this situation. If anyone has experienced anything similar or has any advice that doesn't involve burning sage, tried it, or moving, can't afford it, I'm desperate to hear it, because tonight I have to go back there and I don't know what's waiting for me. Story 8. I've never been the type of person to believe in ghosts or spirits. Growing up, I laughed at horror movies and rolled my eyes when friends told spooky stories at sleepovers. But what's been happening in my apartment these past few weeks has completely changed my perspective. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, and honestly, I'm terrified to be alone here anymore. I'm 17, and I've lived in the same apartment at Oak Ridge Manor my whole life. It's this old building that's been around forever, all brick and creaky floors. My family has a weird history with this place. My great-grandparents moved in first, then my grandparents lived here, then my dad grew up here. My mom's moving in next month too. Sometimes I joke that our family is more permanent than the building itself. The first weird thing happened when I was about 10. I was home alone after school, watching TV in the living room when I heard something fall in the kitchen. It sounded like the metal cup holder we keep on the counter. When I went to check, sure enough, it was on the floor, cups scattered everywhere. I figured maybe it was placed too close to the edge or something, so I picked everything up and went back to my show. But then it happened again and again. Different objects would just fall. The salt and pepper shakers, a plate that was nowhere near the edge of the counter, and there were these strange noises coming from our little balcony that's connected to the kitchen, like someone walking around out there, which is impossible because we're on the 4th floor. After a few weeks of this, everything stopped. For years, nothing happened, and I convinced myself it was just my imagination, or maybe the building settling. I almost forgot about it completely, until 3 weeks ago. I was getting ready for school, standing in front of my bathroom mirror doing my hair. I had placed my hairbrush on the counter, and while I was looking in the mirror, I saw it fall to the floor behind me. I didn't bump the counter or anything. It just fell, like someone had pushed it. That same day, my hairspray fell off the shelf. I put it back, making sure it was secure, and 30 minutes later I heard a loud thud. The hairspray had not only fallen again, but somehow rolled across my hallway carpet to the opposite wall. If you've ever tried to roll something across thick carpet, you know that's practically impossible. It would take serious force to make that happen. I tried to brush it off, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The weird stuff was back, and it seemed different this time, more deliberate. At night, things got worse. I started hearing footsteps near my bed, not loud stomping or anything, but the soft pad of feet, like someone walking very carefully, trying not to wake me. But I was wide awake, frozen under my covers, too scared to look. My desk is cluttered with makeup, school stuff, and random trinkets I've collected over the years. Multiple times now, I've walked into my room to find things on the floor that I know were securely placed on my desk. My favorite snow globe that's heavy and has a flat bottom, a stack of textbooks, my jewelry box. All of these things have fallen without explanation. Last week, I experienced something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I was asleep when something woke me up. It felt like someone was breathing directly into my right ear. I could feel the warmth and hear the soft exhale. My eyes shot open and I jerked upright, but there was nothing there. My cat, Milo, was asleep at the foot of my bed, undisturbed. The room was empty, but I swear I could still feel that breath on my skin. Things escalated during spring break last week when I didn't have to wake up early for school. I've always been a night owl, so I was still up at 3:25 in the morning, just scrolling through TikTok on my phone. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from the kitchen, the distinct noise of forks clattering against plates, like someone was setting the table. It would happen, then stop for exactly 5 seconds, then happen again. Clatter. 5 seconds. Clatter. 5 seconds. Clatter. My parents were out of town visiting my grandmother, so I knew I was alone in the apartment. Well, alone, except for Milo. I got out of bed, heart pounding in my chest, and slowly walked toward the kitchen. The sound continued until I reached the hallway, then suddenly stopped. The kitchen was pitch black. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. Nothing. Everything was exactly as I'd left it earlier that night. The dishes were clean and stacked in the drying rack. No forks or plates were out. I stood there for a minute, confused and scared, before turning off the light and heading back to my room. The moment And I mean the exact moment. I got back into bed, the sound started again. Clatter, 5 seconds. Clatter. My blood ran cold. Whatever this was, it knew I was there. It was waiting for me to leave. It was playing with me. I got up again, this time grabbing my phone as a flashlight, and went back to the kitchen. Again, the sound stopped as I approached. Again, the kitchen was empty. This time I decided to stay. I sat down at the kitchen table in the dark, phone clutched in my sweaty hand, and waited. Nothing happened for 30 minutes. I was about to give up when I heard a faint scratching sound coming from inside one of the cabinets. I didn't open it. I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I ran back to my room and locked the door, pushing my desk chair under the handle for good measure. The next night was even worse. I was sitting on my bed trying to distract myself with homework when I heard a chair in the kitchen rattling like someone was shaking it. Milo, who had been napping beside me, suddenly arched his back and hissed at my bedroom door, his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I stared down the dimly lit hallway toward the kitchen, my entire body tense, and that's when I saw it. A shadow figure ran past my door toward the kitchen, but this wasn't just some vague dark shape or trick of the light. It had a form. Arms, legs, a head. It was the size of a young child, maybe 6 years old, and it moved like a real person with purpose and weight. It wasn't transparent or wispy like you'd imagine a ghost to be. It was solid darkness, like a hole cut into reality in the shape of a child. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound tore out of me before I could stop it. I jumped up and slammed my bedroom door shut, then backed away until I hit the wall. My phone was on my nightstand, and with shaking hands, I called my best friend, Jenna. It was almost midnight, but she answered on the third ring. "I need you to come over," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, something's happening here and I'm scared." Jenna, being the amazing friend she is, showed up 20 minutes later. She stayed with me that night, and nothing else happened while she was there. The next morning I tried to explain everything to her, but I could tell she didn't really believe me. She suggested that maybe I was just stressed about finals, or that the old building was making weird noises. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. This isn't stress or an overactive imagination. Something is in this apartment with me, and I think it's been here for a long time. The thing is, I don't understand why now. Why did it stop when I was younger only to return all these years later? Is it something about me specifically, or is it connected to the apartment? My dad never mentioned experiencing anything strange when he lived here as a kid, but then again, he's not exactly the type to talk about that kind of stuff. I've been sleeping with the lights on since the Shadow Child incident. I've also been researching online about hauntings and spirits, trying to figure out what I'm dealing with. Some websites say that entities feed off fear, which makes me think I should try to be brave, but how can I not be terrified? Other sources suggest that spirits of children are usually playful rather than malevolent, but this doesn't feel playful to me. It feels calculated. Last night I tried talking to it. I felt ridiculous, sitting alone in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, speaking to an empty room. "I know you're here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want? Why are you showing yourself to me now?" There was no response, at least not immediately. But as I was walking back to my room, all the cabinet doors in the kitchen flew open at once. Not violently, just opened, as if someone had carefully unlatched each one simultaneously. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. My parents get back tomorrow, and I'm not sure if I should tell them. My dad might dismiss it, and my mom will probably freak out. Part of me hopes that whatever this is will stop when they're home, but another part of me knows that's wishful thinking. The worst part is the uncertainty. Is this something attached to me, to my family, to this apartment? Is it trying to communicate or just trying to scare me? Is it a child who died here long ago or something else entirely, just taking that form? And most importantly, is it dangerous? So far, nothing has actually harmed me physically, but the psychological toll is immense. I jump at every sound now. I can't sleep without checking under my bed and in my closet first, something I haven't done since I was 8. Right now, as I'm typing this, I keep getting the feeling that something is watching me from the corner of my room. I've checked multiple times and there's nothing there, but the sensation persists. It's like being watched by someone standing right behind you, their gaze burning into the back of your neck. Wait, I just heard something from the kitchen again, the same clattering sound from before. It's 3:25 in the morning, exactly like last time. I don't want to go check, I really don't, but I also can't just sit here. I'm going to grab my phone and record whatever happens. Maybe having evidence will help convince my parents, or at least Jenna, that I'm not losing my mind. Okay, I'm back. I didn't see anything, but the sound stopped as soon as I entered the hallway, just like before. I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes, recording silence, feeling stupid and scared at the same time. But as I was about to head back to my room, the temperature dropped suddenly. It was like walking into a freezer. My breath fogged in front of my face and goosebumps erupted all over my arms. And then I saw it again, the shadow child. It was standing by the refrigerator, completely still, facing me. I couldn't see any features, just the outline of a small person made of darkness. My phone was recording, but I doubt it captured anything. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. We just stood there facing each other across my kitchen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Then it raised one arm, pointing directly at me, and I swear I heard a child's laugh. Not on my phone recording, but inside my head. I ran. I'm back in my room now, door locked, lights on, sitting on my bed with my back against the wall. Milo is hiding under the bed, refusing to come out. I don't know what to do. I don't know what it wants from me. All I know is that something is here in this apartment, something that can take physical form, something that seems to be growing stronger, and it knows I can see it now. Story 9. I never believed in ghosts until I bought this place in Pinehaven. Looking back, I should have known something was off when I got such a good deal on a beachside condo. 5 years in, and I'm living in what I can only describe as a paranormal hotspot. I still remember the first week after moving in. I was unpacking boxes in the kitchen when I heard the dryer door swing open with a loud clang. I figured I hadn't closed it properly and went to shut it. 10 minutes later, it happened again and again. By the fourth time, I stood there watching as the metal door slowly creaked open on its own. No draft, no explanation. Just the door deciding it didn't want to stay closed. That was just the beginning. At first I tried to rationalize everything. The faucets turning on by themselves, must be old plumbing. The utensils falling off countertops. Maybe the building was settling. But when you're alone in your bedroom and clearly hear someone whisper your name from the hallway, that's harder to explain away. I've documented everything over the years. I have a journal filled with dates, times, and descriptions of over 100 incidents. My friends thought I was just being dramatic until they stayed over. Now none of them will. My best friend Melissa lasted the longest, 3 hours, before grabbing her overnight bag and calling an Uber at 2 in the morning. She said she felt someone breathing on her neck while she was brushing her teeth. The worst was what happened with my dad. After my mom passed, he was having trouble maintaining their big house, so I offered him my spare room. He's the most pragmatic person I know, an engineer who believes everything has a logical explanation. He moved in last summer, and I noticed he was acting strange almost immediately. He wouldn't unpack his boxes. When I asked about it, he just mumbled something about not being sure how long he'd stay. 3 months and 23 days later, I came home from work to find a note on the kitchen counter. I can't live here anymore. I'll call you when I get settled somewhere else. His boxes were gone. He hadn't even said goodbye. When I finally got hold of him a week later, all he would say was, "There's something wrong with that place, Vanessa. I couldn't sleep another night there." My dad, who doesn't believe in anything supernatural, was so freaked out, he left without warning. That's when I realized how serious this was. I've identified at least 6 different presences, I guess you'd call them. They each have different energies and behaviors. There's one that stays mainly in the guest bathroom. It likes to play with the shower curtain and move toiletries around. Another one hangs out in the hallway. It's the one that whispers names. There's one in the kitchen that messes with appliances. The one in my bedroom closet is the quietest, but I sometimes see shadows moving under the door at night. The worst two are in the living room. One is what I call the watcher. I constantly feel it observing me when I'm on the couch. The other one is more aggressive. It's knocked pictures off walls and once pushed my coffee table a good 6 inches while I was sitting right there watching TV. Then there are the temporary visitors. They come and go. Some stay for weeks, others for just a day or two. They're usually less powerful, just causing cold spots or making the lights flicker. I've tried everything to get rid of them. I started with sage, burned so much my neighbors complained about the smell. I tried holy water from 3 different churches. I used Palo Santo wood, salt circles, protective crystals. I had a priest come bless the place. I even hired a medium who claimed she could clear the energy. Nothing worked. If anything, it seemed to make them angry. Last month, things escalated to a level I didn't think was possible. Thomas, my boyfriend of 8 months, was staying over. He's been skeptical about my haunted condo stories, thinking I was exaggerating. We were laying in bed, both of us scrolling on our phones before sleep, when we heard it plain as day. A man's voice, deep and clear, saying hello from the foot of the bed. Thomas froze. I felt him tense up beside me. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, too scared to speak. We both sat up and turned on the lights. Nothing was there, of course. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He sat up with his back against the headboard until morning. He still stays over sometimes, but he's different now. More alert, more believing. The worst part is that wasn't even the most disturbing thing that's happened recently. I haven't told anyone this, not even Thomas, but the entities have started touching me. It started with something grabbing my ankles when I get out of bed. Just quick tugs, but definitely a grabbing sensation. Then I started feeling fingers running through my hair when I'm alone. Last week, while I was in the shower, I felt hands on my shoulders, pushing me forward. I almost slipped and fell. 2 nights ago, I woke up to the feeling of someone sitting on my bed. I could feel the mattress dip. I lay perfectly still, eyes closed, heart racing. Then I felt a cold hand on my cheek. I jerked away and screamed, turning on the lamp. Nothing was there, but my cheek felt ice cold where it had touched me. I'm not the only one who's experienced things here. My neighbor Elise from across the hall used to pet sit my cat when I traveled for work. After the 3rd time, she told me she couldn't do it anymore. She said while she was filling my cat's food bowl, all the cabinet doors in the kitchen opened simultaneously, then slammed shut so hard that one of the hinges broke. Another neighbor, Rick, came over to help me move a bookshelf last year and left after 10 minutes, saying he felt like he couldn't breathe in my living room. The rational part of me says I should just move, but it's not that simple. I got this place at such a good price. My mortgage is half what I'd pay in rent anywhere else in Pine Haven. The housing market has gone crazy since I bought it, and I simply can't afford to move right now. I'm saving up to hopefully relocate out of the country in about 2 years. But until then, I'm stuck here with my unwanted roommates. I've tried to make peace with them. I've spoken out loud, asking them to respect my space. I've tried to establish boundaries. You can stay in this part of the condo, but please leave my bedroom alone. Nothing works. If anything, they seem to take pleasure in crossing whatever lines I try to draw. Last night was the worst yet. I was asleep and dreaming when I clearly heard a man's voice in my dreams say, "You need to leave." It was so real that I woke up instantly. As I lay there in the dark, I heard the same voice now in my room repeat, "You need to leave." It wasn't threatening. It almost sounded concerned, like a warning. I turned on my bedside lamp and saw nothing, but the air felt heavy, like it does before a thunderstorm. I got up to get a glass of water, and when I came back to bed, I found my sheets had been pulled completely off the mattress and piled in the corner. The most terrifying thing is how normal this has all become for me. I barely react anymore when the TV turns on by itself or when I find objects moved from where I left them. But the touching and the voices, those still scare me, and they're happening more frequently. I've started keeping my phone on record all night. Most mornings there's nothing unusual on the recordings, but sometimes there are unexplainable sounds, footsteps when I'm alone, whispers too quiet to make out, and once, very clearly, someone calling my name 3 times in a row. My friends think I'm crazy for staying. My dad refuses to even talk about the condo. Thomas is trying to be supportive, but I can tell he's uncomfortable here. He's started suggesting I stay at his place more often, but his roommate situation makes that difficult. Sometimes I wonder if there's something about me that attracts this activity. Did I bring something home with me? Is there something about my energy that feeds them? Or is it just this place, built on land that maybe shouldn't have been disturbed? The locals have stories about Pine Haven's history. Before the condos, this area was undeveloped coastal land. There are rumors about old burial grounds and shipwrecks just offshore. I didn't pay much attention to those tales when I moved in, but now I find myself researching local history, looking for clues. I found out that before my building was constructed 15 years ago, there was a small residential care facility here for elderly patients. It was torn down after a fire killed 3 residents. The developer bought the land cheap and quickly built these condos. I wonder sometimes if those who died here are among my spiritual roommates. For now, I'm just trying to coexist with whatever shares my space. I leave lights on at night. I sleep with headphones in, playing music to drown out the whispers. I've learned which areas of the condo are most active at different times of day and try to avoid them when possible. But I can't avoid the feeling that things are building towards something. The activity is increasing, becoming more physical, more direct. The warning to leave feels significant. I just don't know what it means or what might happen if I ignore it. Last night, I woke up at exactly 3:15 in the morning to find every single light in my condo on. Even the ones inside appliances like the microwave and oven. Every cabinet door was open. Every faucet was running, and in the center of my living room floor was a perfect circle of my personal belongings, photos, jewelry, even my passport. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. Then every light went out simultaneously, plunging me into darkness. In that moment, I felt something rush past me, not one presence, but many, like a crowd of people hurrying by. The air temperature dropped so quickly I could see my breath, and then silence, complete stillness. I slowly turned all the faucets off and closed the cabinets. I gathered my belongings from the floor. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing seemed disturbed anymore. But something had changed. I can feel it. Whatever lives here with me is done with subtle signs and gentle warnings. They want me out, and I don't know how much longer I can ignore them. Story 10. I still don't like to think about what happened that day. It's been 15 years, and I can still hear my baby brother's screams. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard them again. I was 13 at the time, living in an old shotgun-style house in what everyone called a nice, quiet neighborhood. You know the type, where nothing ever happens, where people leave their doors unlocked, where the scariest thing is supposed to be Mrs. Henderson's cat getting stuck in a tree. My dad had converted our garage into a dining room a few years back. It connected directly to the kitchen, and from where I usually sat at the table, I had a clear view straight down the hallway to my bedroom door at the end. That afternoon I was doing homework at the dining table. Math, I think. Pre-algebra. I remember because I was struggling with some equation when everything happened. Mom was outside gardening. She'd gotten really into growing vegetables that spring, and Grandma was in the living room watching her soap operas with the volume up way too loud like always. Dad was still at work. It was just a normal Tuesday afternoon in April. Completely ordinary. I didn't know Mom had put Ethan down for a nap in my room. He was only 18 months old and usually napped in his crib. But Mom had been repainting his room that week, and the paint fumes were still pretty strong. I guess she figured my room was the next best option. I remember feeling thirsty and looking up to grab my water glass. That's when I saw it, just barely in my peripheral vision at first. When I turned to look directly at it, I felt this immediate wrongness. It wasn't like seeing a person or even an animal. It was just darkness. a blob of pure black that didn't reflect any light. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't transparent either. It moved like smoke, but stayed together in one mass, about the size of a large dog, but constantly shifting. I couldn't move. I literally couldn't make my muscles work. It was like someone had turned my body to stone. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't even call out. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy and cold, even though it had been a warm spring day. This thing was just hovering at the entrance to the hallway, maybe 10 feet away from me. It didn't make any sound. There was no whooshing or breathing or anything you'd expect, just this unnatural silence that seemed to suck all the normal house sounds away. Then it started moving down the hallway, not floating exactly, more like gliding, smooth, purposeful movements. It didn't touch the ground, but it didn't fly high either. Just this black mass moving at about waist height toward my bedroom. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run after it. I wanted to call for my mom or grandma, but I just sat there completely frozen, watching this thing slide down our hallway like it knew exactly where it was going. When it reached my bedroom door, it paused for just a second. I swear it seemed to pulse, like it got a little bigger and then smaller again. Then it just went through the door, not opened it, went through it, like the door wasn't even there. I think that's when I finally managed to breathe again. My brain was trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Was it a shadow from outside, a weird reflection, some kind of hallucination from studying too hard? Then I heard it, Ethan's scream. Not a normal baby cry, but this high-pitched, terrified shriek that didn't even sound human. It was the kind of scream that makes your blood turn to ice, the kind that tells you something is deeply, horribly wrong. Before I could even get up from my chair, I saw Ethan come tearing out of my bedroom. He was in this weird half-crawl, half-run that toddlers do when they're panicking. His little legs kept getting tangled up and he fell forward, caught himself with his hands, then scrambled up again. His face was red and wet with tears, and he was making this awful choking sound between screams, like he couldn't catch his breath. "Mama, Mama!" He kept yelling, but it came out garbled through his sobs. I finally broke out of my trance and ran to him. I scooped him up and his whole body was shaking violently. He felt cold, even though he was sweating, and he clung to me so tight his little fingernails dug into my skin. His heart was pounding so fast I could feel it against my chest. "It's okay, buddy. It's okay," I kept saying, but he wouldn't stop screaming. He kept looking back toward my bedroom door with absolute terror in his eyes. Mom came running in from the backyard, garden gloves still on, dirt on her knees. "What happened? What's wrong?" She took Ethan from me, but he just kept screaming and reaching out toward me like he didn't want to let go. "I don't know," I said. "He just started screaming and came running out of my room." I didn't mention the shadow thing. How could I? It sounded crazy even in my own head. Mom thought he'd had a nightmare or maybe fallen off the bed, even though she'd put pillows all around him. She checked him for injuries but couldn't find anything wrong. Grandma came in and tried to help calm him down, but Ethan wouldn't stop crying for almost an hour. He kept pointing at my bedroom door and saying, "Bad, bad, bad," one of the few words he knew at that age. That night, everything changed. When Mom tried to put Ethan in his crib, the paint was dry enough by then. He completely lost it, screaming, thrashing, clinging to her like his life depended on it. They tried everything, leaving the light on, playing music, sitting with him until he fell asleep. But the moment they tried to leave, he'd wake up screaming. For weeks, he wouldn't sleep alone, not in his crib, not in my parents' bed, not anywhere unless someone was physically holding him. Even then, he'd wake up multiple times a night, eyes wide with fear, his little body shaking. My parents took him to the doctor, thinking maybe he had an ear infection or something causing him pain. The doctor found nothing wrong. They even took him to a child psychologist, who suggested it might be a phase, maybe some developmental thing, but I knew better. Whatever Ethan had seen in my room that day had terrified him to his core. I didn't want to sleep in my room either, but I couldn't explain why without sounding crazy. I started making excuses. It was too hot, too cold. I wanted to sleep on the couch to watch late-night TV. Sometimes I'd sleep in Grandma's room on a makeshift bed on the floor. I kept the lights on as much as possible. About a month after it happened, I finally worked up the courage to ask Ethan what he saw. We were playing with his blocks in the living room, and I casually asked, "What scared you in Maya's room that day?" He stopped playing immediately. His little face got so serious, in that way that looks wrong on a toddler. He looked at me and said, "Dark man, no eyes." Then he went back to his blocks like nothing had happened. I never saw the shadow thing again, but sometimes, when I was alone in the house, I'd feel like something was watching me. The air would get heavy, and I'd get goosebumps all over my arms. I'd turn around quickly, expecting to see that black mass, but there was never anything there. Ethan eventually got better. By the time he was 3, he could sleep in his own bed again, though he insisted on having not just 1 but 3 night lights. He stopped talking about the dark man and seemed to forget about the whole thing. But I never forgot. Every time I visit my parents' house, I still feel uneasy walking down that hallway. I still avoid looking into the corners of rooms or dark doorways. I still sleep with a small light on, even at 28 years old. What bothers me most is that I've seen shadows before. You know, those quick movements you catch out of the corner of your eye that look like someone walked by but no one's there. This wasn't like that at all. Those shadow people at least look human-shaped. This was something entirely different, something that shouldn't exist in our world. Ethan's married now with a kid of his own. Last Christmas, we were all at my parents' house, and his 2-year-old daughter was napping in my old room. Suddenly, Ethan got really anxious and went to check on her for no apparent reason. When he came back, he was carrying her, even though she was still asleep. "She's fine sleeping in there, you know," my mom said. Ethan just shook his head. "I don't want her in that room alone." He caught my eye across the living room, and I knew he remembered. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep down, he remembered what had happened that day. I've researched shadow entities over the years. Some people say they're interdimensional beings. Others think they're some form of negative energy or even demons. I don't know what to believe. All I know is what I saw and what it did to my brother. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, moving through the walls of my parents' house, waiting, or worse, if it followed one of us when we moved out. Every unexplained noise, every sudden cold spot, every nightmare makes me wonder if it's found me again. Whatever it was, it changed us both that day, and I'm still looking over my shoulder 15 years later, afraid I'll see that formless darkness moving toward me again. Story 11. I've never been the type to believe in the paranormal, ghost stories, hauntings, demons. I always laughed that stuff off as campfire tales or the product of overactive imaginations. But something happened to me last month that I still can't explain, and I haven't had a decent night's sleep since. I live alone in a small 2-bedroom house in Mapleton. It's your typical quiet suburb. Neat lawns, neighbors who wave but don't really talk, the occasional kid's birthday party disrupting the weekend silence. Nothing exciting ever happens here, which is exactly why I chose it. After working long shifts at the warehouse, I just want peace and quiet. That night started like any other Tuesday. I got home around 7, microwaved some leftover pasta, and flopped down on my couch to watch TV. Nothing special about the evening at all. I remember scrolling through my streaming options and settling on King of the Hill. Just some comfortable background noise while I scrolled through my phone. I wasn't even particularly tired, just comfortably zoned out after a long day. I must have dozed off around 9:30. I remember checking my phone one last time, seeing the time, and thinking I should probably head to bed soon. But the couch was comfortable, and I was in that perfect position where you just can't be bothered to move. I was lying on my stomach, one arm hanging off the couch, the other tucked under a pillow. The next thing I knew, I was awake, but not really awake. It's hard to explain if you've never experienced sleep paralysis before. I was conscious enough to know where I was, still on my couch, King of the Hill still playing on the TV, but I couldn't move. Not a finger, not a toe, nothing. At first, I wasn't scared. This had happened to me once or twice before, years ago. Sleep paralysis. Your mind wakes up before your body does. I knew that all I had to do was stay calm and wait it out, or try to wiggle a toe or finger to break the spell. But then I felt it, this crushing pressure on my back, like someone was sitting on me, pushing me down into the couch. The pressure kept building. It wasn't like weight distributed across my back, it was concentrated, almost like hands pressing down on my shoulder blades. I tried to tell myself it was just part of the sleep paralysis, just my brain playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew this was different. I could still see the TV from where my head was turned. I could hear Hank Hill's voice perfectly clearly, and I recognized the episode, the one where Bobby gets a job as a rodeo clown. But everything around the TV was getting darker, blurrier, like looking through a tunnel that was slowly closing. That's when I felt it. Something poking me from behind. Not the general pressure from before, but a distinct, deliberate prodding right between my shoulder blades, then again lower, near my ribs, then higher up, near my neck, like something was testing me, checking if I could respond. The poking became more insistent, more rhythmic. Poke, pause, each time a little harder, a little more deliberate. I was completely helpless, unable to turn around, unable to call out, unable to do anything but lie there and endure it. In my head, I was screaming. I was begging my body to move, to turn over, to do something, anything, to get out of this vulnerable position. The terror was overwhelming. I felt like prey, pinned down and helpless, being toyed with by a predator. What made it worse was that I could still see my living room, not some dream version, the actual room, exactly as it had been when I fell asleep. My water bottle was still on the coffee table, half empty with condensation beading on the outside. The throw blanket was still bunched up by my feet where I'd kicked it earlier. The light from the kitchen was still casting that yellowish glow across the floor. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for what was happening to me. The poking stopped, and for a split second I felt relief. But then something worse began, a slow, deliberate tracing along my spine, from the base of my neck downward. Not a finger, not anything solid. It felt like electricity, a current of some kind moving down my back, leaving a trail of pins and needles in its wake. I've never been so terrified in my life. I was mentally thrashing, desperately trying to break free from whatever had me pinned down. And then, somehow, I managed to move, just my left arm at first, but it was something. I don't know how I did it. Pure adrenaline, I guess. I made a fist and swung it backward in a wild, uncoordinated punch while simultaneously trying to twist my body over. As I turned, I saw it. Just for a split second before I fully woke up, but I saw it. The entity, I don't know what else to call it, was hovering above where I had been lying. It wasn't solid, wasn't fully there. The best way I can describe it is vibrational, like those visual effects in movies when something's invisible, but you can see the air distortion around it, like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, but darker, more dense, a shadow with depth, rippling and undulating like heat waves over asphalt. The moment I saw it, it moved. Fast. Not like walking or floating, but like it just relocated itself. 1 second it was above the couch, and the next it was by my hallway entrance, and then it was gone, like it knew it had been seen and was retreating. I sat bolt upright on the couch, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was drenched in sweat, gasping for air like I'd been underwater. The TV was still playing the exact same episode. My water bottle was in the same place. Everything was identical to what I'd seen during the paralysis. That's what makes it so hard to dismiss as just a nightmare. Everything matched. The continuity was perfect. If it was just a dream, how did my brain perfectly recreate every detail of my living room, down to the exact point in the episode that was playing? I sat there for hours, afraid to move, afraid to turn off the lights, afraid to go to my bedroom. I kept all the lights on and sat with my back against the wall until sunrise. I called in sick to work the next day. I couldn't bring myself to lie down again. It's been 3 weeks now. I've rearranged my furniture so nothing's against a wall. I've installed motion detecting lights in every room. I've even had a friend stay over a few times, though I haven't told him exactly why. Just made up some story about a break-in attempt in the neighborhood. But nothing helps. Every time I start to drift off, I jerk awake, terrified I'll feel that pressure again, that poking, that presence. I've started sleeping in short bursts, sitting upright in a chair instead of lying down. I know it's not sustainable, but I don't know what else to do. The thing is, I keep asking myself, what would have happened if I hadn't managed to turn over? What was it doing to me? Testing me? Feeding off me somehow? Or was it trying to, I don't know, get inside? The thought makes me sick with fear. And the worst part is that I don't know if it's gone for good. Sometimes when I'm alone in my house, I get this feeling that it's watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down again. I'll catch movement in my peripheral vision, or feel a sudden cold spot in a room, or hear something that sounds like whispering coming from empty spaces. I know how this sounds. Believe me, I do. If someone had told me this story a month ago, I'd have thought they were making it up or needed psychiatric help. Maybe I do need help. Maybe this was just an unusually vivid episode of sleep paralysis combined with an overactive imagination. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw. And I know that whatever it was real. At least in some way, in some space between dreaming and waking. It existed there, and it was aware of me. And sometimes, when I'm drifting off despite my best efforts to stay awake, I swear I can feel that same pressure starting to build on my chest, and I wonder if it's found its way back. I don't know what to do. I can't keep living like this, jumping at shadows and afraid to sleep. But I also can't shake the feeling that whatever visited me that night is still out there, somewhere between reality and nightmare, waiting for another chance to get to me. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this, or am I truly losing my mind? Story 12. I still don't sleep right. It's been almost 7 months, but every time the wind blows through the trees outside my bedroom window, I'm right back there in those wetlands, paralyzed with fear. I keep my .22 semi on my nightstand now. My girlfriend thinks I'm paranoid, but she wasn't there. She didn't hear what we heard. I've lived on the outskirts of Gary, Indiana my whole life. My house sits at the end of Creekside Road, right where the pavement gives up and the forest takes over. Nothing fancy, just a small 3-bedroom place my parents left me when they moved to Florida. The backyard is decent sized, but it butts right up against about 40 acres of dense woodland and wetlands. Growing up, I loved having the forest as my playground. As an adult, I still enjoyed having bonfires out back, drinking a few beers and listening to the night sounds. That all changed last October. It started with small things, lights in the woods where there shouldn't be any, not flashlights, more like, I don't know, glowing orbs. They'd appear for a few seconds between the trees, then vanish. I figured it was just kids messing around or maybe some weird reflection. Then came the sounds. Not normal forest sounds like owls or coyotes. These were different, like metal scraping against metal, but organic somehow. Hard to describe. By mid-October, things got weirder. I was having a bonfire alone on a Tuesday night. Nothing special, just unwinding after work with a couple beers. The fire was crackling, and I was scrolling through my phone when I heard it. Footsteps in the trees, maybe 10 yards into the forest from where I was sitting. Slow, deliberate steps. Crunch, crunch, crunch on the fallen leaves, then silence for maybe 5 seconds, then more steps. I called out, "Hello? Somebody there?" No answer, just the footsteps continuing their pattern. Walk, pause, walk, pause. Whatever it was, it seemed to be moving parallel to my property line, not coming closer, but not going away either. I told myself it was probably a deer, even though it didn't sound like a deer at all. Deer don't walk with that kind of purpose. After about 5 minutes, I started to relax a bit, figuring whatever it was would move on. That's when everything changed. The footsteps suddenly accelerated, crashing through the underbrush directly toward me. It sounded like something big was charging right at me from the darkness. I didn't even think. I knocked over my chair, dropped my beer, and ran for the house. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, heart pounding in my chest. I stood there in my kitchen, peering through the window toward the bonfire, which was still burning outside. Nothing emerged from the trees. After about 20 minutes, I worked up the courage to go back out and put out the fire, but I brought my baseball bat with me. Nothing happened the rest of that night. A week later, I tried again. Different night, same setup. This time I had my phone ready to record if I heard anything. About an hour in, it started again, the same pattern of footsteps. Walk, pause, walk, pause. I hit record on my phone and pointed it toward the sound. The footsteps continued for maybe 3 minutes, and then, just like before, whatever it was, charged directly at me. The sound of breaking branches and crunching leaves came rushing toward me at an impossible speed. I ran inside again, completely terrified. When I checked my phone later, the audio picked up the footsteps, but they were much quieter than they had sounded in person. The charging sound was there too, but it didn't capture the sheer terror of the moment. What was weird though was a strange distortion in the audio right when the charging began, like some kind of electronic interference. This happened once more about 2 weeks later. Same pattern, same terrifying charge, same result. Me running inside like a scared kid. After that, I decided no more solo bonfires. Whatever was out there seemed to only appear when I was alone, and it seemed to be toying with me. Fast forward to November 4th, my buddy Mike came over to hang out. Mike's been my friend since high school, works construction, built like a linebacker, not the type to scare easily. I told him about the weird stuff that had been happening, and of course he laughed it off. Probably just a homeless dude messing with you, he said, or you're just hearing things after a few too many beers. I wasn't convinced, but having Mike around made me feel braver. We decided to take a walk on one of the trails that cuts through the wetlands behind my property. It was around 4 in the afternoon, still plenty of daylight left. The trail is nothing special, just a narrow dirt path that local kids and hikers have carved out over the years. It winds through the trees for about 2 miles before looping back. The day was crisp, classic November in Indiana, cloudy, around 45 degrees, with most of the leaves already fallen. The wetlands were partially frozen, creating this eerie stillness. We were about 15 minutes in, maybe a mile from my house, when Mike stopped to take a leak behind a tree. I was waiting for him, kicking at some leaves, when I heard it, a howl. But not like a wolf or a coyote. This was different, higher pitched, almost like a shriek mixed with a howl. It echoed through the trees from somewhere far off, maybe half a mile away. "You hear that?" I called to Mike. "Yeah," he said, zipping up his pants. "Probably just a coyote." I shook my head. That's not what coyotes sound like around here. Before Mike could respond, the same exact sound came again, but this time it was right beside us, not 10 feet away in the brush. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mike's eyes went wide. "What the fuck?" he whispered. Then the sound came again, back in the distance, the exact same pitch and duration. It was impossible. Nothing could move that fast, from right next to us to hundreds of yards away, in less than a second. We stood frozen, listening. The distant howl shriek came again, then instantly it was behind us, then to our right, then from somewhere far ahead on the trail. It was like whatever was making the sound was teleporting around us, or like there were multiple creatures calling to each other, but each shriek was identical. The same pitch, the same duration, like a recording being played from different locations. "We need to go," Mike said, his voice tense. "Now." We turned to head back toward my house, walking fast, but not running yet. The sounds continued, jumping from distant to right next to us with no pattern. Sometimes they'd be silent for 30 seconds, making us think it was over. Then they'd start again, somehow even closer than before. About halfway back to my house, the shrieking changed. It started coming from multiple directions at once, overlapping, creating this chorus of inhuman wailing that surrounded us completely. That's when we started running. I'm not in great shape, but I've never run so fast in my life. Mike was ahead of me, crashing through the brush where the trail narrowed. The shrieking followed us, always right on our heels no matter how fast we ran. At one point I swear I felt hot breath on the back of my neck, but I was too terrified to look back. Then my foot caught on a root and I went down hard, face first into the dirt. I scrambled to get up, mud and leaves sticking to my palms. Mike was already 20 feet ahead, still running. "Mike!" I screamed. "Wait!" He either didn't hear me or was too scared to stop. I got to my feet and started running again, but I could feel something right behind me. The shrieking was so loud now, it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. That's when it happened. I felt something grab the back of my jacket, just a tug, but it was enough. And in that moment, I completely lost control of my bladder. I'm a 32-year-old man and I pissed myself like a toddler. The warm wetness spread down my leg as I somehow found another burst of speed. I could see the edge of my property now, Mike already climbing over my back fence. I pushed myself harder than I thought possible, the shrieking somehow both everywhere and nowhere at once. I reached the fence and practically threw myself over it, landing hard on the other side. Mike was on his knees in my backyard, gasping for breath. I collapsed next to him, my pants soaked, my heart feeling like it might explode. For a moment, there was silence. No shrieking, no footsteps, nothing but our ragged breathing. Then, from just on the other side of the fence, not 3 feet from where we lay, came one final shriek, so loud and so close that it felt like my eardrums would burst. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds, then cut off abruptly. We scrambled to our feet and ran into my house, locking the door behind us. We didn't speak for a long time, just sat in my living room trying to process what had happened. Finally, Mike looked at me. "Dude," he said, "you pissed yourself." I looked down at my soaked jeans and started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. Mike joined in, this hysterical laughter that was just one step away from screaming. When we finally calmed down, Mike asked, "What the hell was that?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but it wasn't anything natural." Mike left an hour later, claiming he had to get home to his girlfriend, but I could tell he just didn't want to be in my house after dark. I don't blame him. He hasn't been back since, though we still talk. He never mentions what happened, and neither do I. That night, I went to a sporting goods store and bought a .22 semi-automatic. I keep it loaded in my nightstand drawer now. I've thought about moving, but this house is all I have. I can't afford to just pick up and leave. I don't use the backyard anymore. I've let the grass grow wild near the fence line, creating a buffer between my house and the woods. I don't open my curtains on that side of the house. Sometimes, usually around dusk, I still hear the footsteps, walk, pause, moving along the edge of my property. Occasionally, late at night, I'll hear a distant shriek from deep in the wetlands. I've researched local folklore, called the DNR to ask about unusual wildlife, even reached out to a paranormal investigation group, though I told them it was just for curiosity's sake. No one has answers. The wetlands behind my house have no history of strange occurrences, no legends or ghost stories attached to them. All I know is what Mike and I experienced that day was real. Something was out there that could move in ways nothing should be able to move. Something that made sounds nothing natural should make. And sometimes when the wind is right and the night is quiet, I swear I can still hear it waiting just beyond the trees, watching my house, waiting for me to let my guard down and venture back into its territory. I haven't, and I never will again. Story 13. I'm not usually the type of person who believes in ghosts or spirits or any of that supernatural stuff. I've always considered myself pretty logical. The kind who needs to see something to believe it. That was until last Friday when something happened that I still can't explain, no matter how hard I try to find a rational explanation. My best friend Olivia and I were hanging out at my place in Westlake. It was just a normal Friday night. We'd ordered pizza, were playing some video games, and eventually just started talking about random stuff like we always do. Somehow we got onto the topic of paranormal shows and how fake they seemed. "Did you see that episode where they freaked out over a door closing by itself?" I laughed, tossing a piece of popcorn into my mouth. Like, hello, ever heard of a draft? Olivia snorted. Oh my God, yes. Or when they get all excited about some blurry orb in a photo that's obviously just dust or something on the lens. We kept going like this for a while, each of us trying to outdo the other with examples of the most ridiculous paranormal evidence we'd seen online or on TV. It was all in good fun. We were just killing time before deciding what movie to watch. After a while, Olivia got this mischievous look on her face. I'd seen it before. It usually meant she was about to suggest something stupid or silly. We should try it, she said, sitting up straighter on my bed. Try what? I asked, though I already had a feeling where this was going. You know, call out to the spirits or whatever. She wiggled her fingers in a spooky gesture. See if we can get a response. I rolled my eyes. Seriously? You want to have a ghost session in my bedroom? Why not? We both know nothing's going to happen. It'll be funny, I shrugged. It seemed harmless enough. We were both skeptics after all. This wasn't about actually trying to contact anything. It was just us making fun of people who did believe in this stuff. Olivia cleared her throat dramatically and raised her hands in the air. Attention, any spirits that might be hanging around Emma's boring bedroom, she called out in an exaggerated voice. We formally invite you to make yourselves known. I couldn't help but giggle at how ridiculous she looked. She shot me a glare, trying to stay in character. If there are any ghosts here, please feel free to, I don't know, push something off a shelf, knock a picture off the wall, move something, turn off a light, anything to prove you exist. We both lost it then, dissolving into laughter. It was so stupid, but also kind of fun to play along with. No, you have to be more specific, I said, getting into it now. Dear ghosties, if you're real, please make my math textbook fly across the room so I don't have to study for Monday's test. Olivia was about to add something else when her water bottle, which had been sitting on my desk, suddenly fell over with a loud clatter. We both jumped, then looked at each other for a second before bursting into more laughter. Nice try, Ghost, Olivia said, getting up to pick up her bottle. But that was definitely just gravity. It was probably balanced weird to begin with. Just as she said that, my bedside lamp flickered, not in a subtle way either. It dimmed significantly for about 2 seconds, then went back to normal. We both noticed it. I saw Olivia's smile falter slightly. Okay, that was a little weird, I admitted, trying to keep my voice casual. But it's probably just a power surge or something. This house has old wiring. Yeah, totally, Olivia agreed quickly. Just a coincidence. But there was this tension in the room now that hadn't been there before. I felt slightly uneasy, though I was trying not to show it. I didn't want to give Olivia the satisfaction of thinking she'd freaked me out with our stupid ghost game. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed to be getting more into it. Maybe it was her way of dealing with the weird coincidences, or maybe she just wanted to push things further. Wow, are you actually trying to communicate with us? She asked the empty room, her voice a mix of mockery and challenge. If you're really here, why don't you do something more impressive? Touch one of us maybe. I dare you. Liv, maybe we should, I started to say, but she cut me off. What, are you scared now? She teased. It's just us messing around. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not scared, I insisted, though I was feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I just think this is getting boring. Can we watch a movie or something instead? Olivia looked at me for a moment, then shrugged. Fine, party pooper. But just so the spirits know, you have our full permission to interact with us however you want. We're totally open to experiencing whatever paranormal activity you've got. Speak for yourself, I muttered, grabbing the remote. I'm revoking any and all permissions. We dropped the ghost stuff after that and scrolled through Netflix for way too long before settling on some cheesy horror movie. Ironically enough, the weird incidents with the water bottle and the lamp faded to the back of my mind as we got caught up in the film and making fun of the terrible special effects. By the time Olivia left around 11 that night, I'd pretty much forgotten about our little paranormal mockery session. I went through my normal routine, brushed my teeth, washed my face, scrolled through social media for longer than I should have, and eventually went to sleep around midnight. I slept fine. No nightmares, no weird sensations, nothing that would make for a good ghost story. When I woke up the next morning, everything seemed normal at first. I stumbled downstairs for breakfast, still half asleep and thinking about what I needed to do that day. It wasn't until I was halfway through my cereal that I noticed a dull ache in my right forearm. I rubbed at it absently, figuring I'd slept on it wrong or something. But the ache didn't go away. It wasn't excruciating or anything, just a persistent discomfort that I couldn't ignore. After breakfast, I went back upstairs to change out of my pajamas. I pulled off my long-sleeved sleep shirt, and that's when I saw them. 3 long, thin scratches running down the inside of my right forearm, from just below my elbow, almost to my wrist. They were red and slightly raised, like fresh scratches tend to be, but they weren't bleeding. Next to them, there was a bruise about the size of a quarter, a distinct purplish mark that definitely hadn't been there the day before. I stared at my arm in confusion. I had no memory of scratching myself or bumping into anything that could have caused a bruise. I always trim my nails short, so I couldn't have done this to myself in my sleep without noticing. Besides, these scratches were too straight, too deliberate looking. I tried to think back to the previous day. Had I reached into something and scraped my arm? Had I knocked it against a door frame or furniture? Nothing came to mind. I'd been at school, then home with Olivia, then bed. Nothing that would explain these marks. A chill ran down my spine as an unwelcome thought crept in. Our stupid ghost session, Olivia's dare for something to touch us, her giving permission for whatever might be there to interact with us. No, that was ridiculous. I was being ridiculous. There had to be a logical explanation. I quickly grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of my arm, then sent it to Olivia with the message, "Hey, did I hurt my arm somehow when you were over yesterday? Woke up with these scratches and have no idea where they came from." She replied almost immediately, "WTF? No, your arm was fine when I was there. I would have noticed that. Where did those come from?" I typed back, "No idea. Woke up with them this morning. Weird, right?" There was a pause before her next message appeared. "Maybe our ghost friend took me up on that dare after all." She was joking, obviously, but reading those words sent a wave of panic through me. My hands started shaking so badly I had to put the phone down for a minute. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Ghosts weren't real, and even if they were, why would one suddenly appear in my perfectly normal, non-haunted house just because we'd mocked the paranormal for a few minutes? But then, the water bottle, the flickering light, and now these unexplainable marks on my arm. I picked up my phone again and called Olivia instead of texting. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" She sounded way too casual for my current state of mind. "Do you think—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. It sounded too absurd to say out loud. "Think what?" she prompted. "You know what?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The ghost thing from last night." There was a pause on her end. "Emma, come on. You don't actually believe that, do you? There's got to be a logical explanation for those scratches." "Like what?" I demanded. "I didn't have them yesterday. I didn't do anything that would cause them. They just appeared overnight, Olivia. Right after we spent an hour mocking spirits and you literally invited them to touch us." "Okay, calm down," she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice now. "It's probably nothing. Maybe you scratched yourself in your sleep. Maybe your cat—" "I don't have a cat." "Right, sorry. Look, it's just a weird coincidence, that's all." But I wasn't convinced anymore. The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. What if we had actually contacted something? What if by mockingly giving permission we'd opened some kind of door? What if whatever came through that door had marked me while I slept? It's been 5 days now. The scratches have mostly healed, though the bruise is still visible. Nothing else strange has happened in my house, but I can't shake this feeling of being watched. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my room, I could swear I feel something brush against my arm, right where the scratches appeared. Olivia thinks I'm overreacting. My parents didn't even notice the marks. Nobody has any explanation that makes sense. All I know is that I'm never, ever mocking the paranormal again. And if you're reading this, maybe you shouldn't either. You never know what might be listening, or what might take you up on an invitation you never truly meant to extend. Story 14. I still get chills thinking about what happened that day in late 2016. I've never told anyone the full story because, well, who would believe me? But I need to get this off my chest, even if it sounds crazy. I was working as a sheriff's deputy in Sacramento County at the time. After 5 years on the force and 4 years in the Army before that, I was completely burned out. Being 33 and handling everything from domestic disputes to murder scenes as part of the CSI team had worn me down. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions, counting down until retirement. It was a normal weekday afternoon when the call came in about a domestic disturbance at the Safeway in my patrol area. Dispatch said a Hispanic male was slapping a female in the parking lot, but things had calmed down by the time the call was placed. Standard procedure, nothing I hadn't handled 100 times before. I remember pulling into the parking lot around 1 in the afternoon. The place was packed with shoppers, typical for that time of day. I spotted the couple immediately near the entrance. One look, and I knew they were Norterno gang members. The guy had those teardrop tattoos by his eye and neck tats that were practically a calling card. The girl was wearing all the typical colors and had that hardened look you develop when you've been in that life for a while. Following protocol, I approached them, identified myself, and separated them for questioning. I handcuffed the male suspect, standard procedure in domestic calls, and had them both seated on the curb outside the store entrance. I positioned myself facing the store with my back to the parking lot, which in hindsight was a rookie mistake for someone with my experience. But like I said, burnout was real and I was operating on autopilot. I started talking to the female first, asking what happened, taking notes on my clipboard. There were people coming and going all around us, shopping carts rattling past, car doors slamming shut in the parking lot behind me. Just normal background noise that you learn to tune out. That's when it happened. I heard a voice, but not like someone talking to me from outside. This was inside my head, clear as day. The most beautiful female voice I've ever heard in my life. It wasn't like a thought or my internal voice. This was something else entirely. Smooth, perfect pitch, almost like those AI assistants, but way more real and present. All it said was, "Turn around." That's it. Just those 2 words. But at the exact same moment the voice spoke, something impossible happened. My entire life, all 33 years of it, flashed before my eyes in what felt like a split second. Not just highlights or random memories, but everything, ending with a vision that felt more real than the clipboard in my hands. I saw a Hispanic man, probably in his 30s, walking up directly behind me. Blue jeans, Adidas shoes, red plaid long-sleeved shirt, and in this vision, he pulled a gun and shot me in the back of the head. I saw myself falling forward, felt the impact of the bullet, everything. Then I was back in the present, standing there with my clipboard. Maybe half a second had passed in real time. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Without even thinking, I turned around, and there he was, exactly 15 feet away, the same man from my vision, same red plaid shirt, same jeans, same Adidas shoes, same everything, walking directly toward me with purpose in his stride. I almost dropped my clipboard. The hair on my arms stood straight up, and I felt ice in my veins. This wasn't déjà vu. This was something else entirely. I managed to keep my composure somehow, and called out to him, "Hey, can I help you?" He stopped, looking momentarily surprised that I'd turned around. "Nah, man, just checking on my friends," he said, nodding toward the handcuffed guy and the woman. Something about him felt wrong. Not just suspicious, but wrong on a deeper level. I've encountered plenty of dangerous people in my career, but there was something different about this guy, something almost predatory. "They're being detained right now. I need you to leave the area," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Sure thing, officer," he said with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. He turned and walked back into the parking lot, disappearing between the rows of cars. My hands were shaking as I turned back to continue the interview. I tried to focus on the domestic call, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. That voice, the vision, the man appearing exactly as I'd seen him. None of it made any logical sense. I'd just started asking the female another question when it happened again. Turn around. The same perfect voice, the same life-flashing vision, the same ending with the man in the red plaid shirt approaching to shoot me. This time I didn't hesitate. I spun around and drew my weapon in one motion. There he was again, same distance, same direction, same clothes. But this time, seeing my hand on my gun, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Sir, stay where you are," I shouted, my voice echoing across the parking lot. Shoppers froze and stared. With my free hand, I grabbed my radio and called for backup. Code 3, lights and sirens. The man's face changed. It wasn't fear I saw. It was calculation. His eyes darted around, measuring options. When the distant wail of sirens became audible, he made his choice. Without a word, he turned and walked quickly into the Safeway. I wanted to pursue him, but I couldn't leave my detainees. My priority was to maintain control of the domestic situation until backup arrived. Those 3 minutes waiting for my partner to arrive were the longest of my life. I kept scanning the store entrance, half expecting the man to emerge with a weapon. When my partner finally pulled up, I quickly briefed him about the suspicious male who'd entered the store. We secured the domestic suspects in the patrol car and then searched the Safeway thoroughly, aisle by aisle. But the man was gone. We checked the loading dock, the bathrooms, the storage areas. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. We pulled the security camera footage, but here's the strangest part. There was no clear shot of his face. In every angle, something obscured him. A display, another shopper, or he was just outside the frame. The best image we got was a blurry side profile that could have been anyone. I never mentioned the voice to my partner or anyone else at the department. How could I? "Hey guys," a mysterious woman's voice inside my head warned me about an assassin. They'd have me turning in my badge and scheduling a psych eval before the end of shift. After we processed the domestic violence suspects, I went back to that Safeway on my own time. I walked the aisles, checked the surrounding businesses, even asked around about the man in the red plaid shirt. Nobody remembered seeing him. It was as if he only existed in that moment, for that purpose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind. What if I hadn't turned around? What if that voice hadn't warned me? The medical examiner had shown me enough execution-style shootings to know exactly what would have happened. I would have been another statistic, another officer down in the line of duty. In the days that followed, I checked every gang database, every booking photo, trying to identify the man. I never found him. I drove by that Safeway every shift for months afterward, scanning faces, looking for that red plaid shirt. Nothing. I left the sheriff's department a year later. The burnout had become too much, and after that day, something in me had changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been given a second chance at life. It's been years now, and I've never heard that voice again. Never had another vision like that. Sometimes I wonder if the stress and exhaustion caused some kind of hallucination that coincidentally saved my life. But deep down, I know what happened was real. I don't know who or what that voice belonged to. Guardian angel? Psychic phenomenon? Some hidden part of my own consciousness? I don't have those answers. All I know is that something impossible happened that day outside a Safeway in Sacramento County, and whatever it was, it saved my life. Story 15. I've never told this to anyone outside my family, but I need to get this off my chest. It happened about 3 years ago when I went back to the Philippines for my cousin Mara's wedding. I'm still not sure what to make of it, and honestly, it still gives me chills thinking about it. I had been living in the States for almost a decade at that point, and this was my first time going back home in 5 years. I was super excited to see everyone, my aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. My mom couldn't make the trip because of work, so I went alone. My Aunt Tita Elena's house was packed with relatives. There were people everywhere, sleeping on couches, on mattresses, on the floor, sharing rooms. Typical Filipino family gathering chaos. I was assigned to share a room with my two younger cousins, Jenny, 17, and Lily, 12. The sleeping arrangement was tight. We had to share one queen-sized bed pushed into the corner of the room against the wall. I got the outer edge, Lily was in the middle, and Jenny was against the wall. The room itself wasn't very big. There was the bed, a dresser with a huge mirror directly across from the bed and a closet next to it. The door was to the right of the closet. It was an old house, the kind with those heavy wooden doors that make a creaking sound when you open them. The windows had these old-fashioned curtains that didn't quite block out all the moonlight. After a long day of wedding preparations and catching up with relatives I hadn't seen in years, we all went to bed exhausted. I remember having trouble falling asleep at first because of the jet lag and the unfamiliar bed, but eventually I drifted off. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. It was that instant kind of awake where 1 second you're asleep and the next you're completely conscious. The first thing I noticed was that I couldn't move. Not a finger, not a toe, nothing. Just my eyes. I've had sleep paralysis before, but it had been years since my last episode. If you've never experienced sleep paralysis, it's terrifying. Your mind is awake, but your body is still locked in sleep. You can't move, can't speak, can't even scream. And the worst part? Sometimes it comes with hallucinations. The room was dimly lit by moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could see both Jenny and Lily sleeping peacefully beside me. Lily's arm was thrown across my stomach, her breathing slow and steady. That's when I noticed the door was wide open. I was certain we had closed it before going to bed. Tita Elena had been adamant about keeping doors closed at night because of the mosquitoes. But there it was, standing open about halfway. As I stared at the open door, trying to remember if someone had come in earlier, a small figure appeared in the doorway. It was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with shoulder-length hair in a neat bob cut. She was wearing what looked like a simple white dress or nightgown. My first thought was that it was my cousin Anna, Tita Elena's youngest daughter, who was about that age. I figured she was looking for her mom or had gotten up to use the bathroom. The girl didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment, then slowly walked into the room. Her movements were off somehow, not quite natural, quite. She moved in a way that reminded me of those old VHS tapes when you'd pause and then play them again. Slightly jerky, like frames were missing. I tried to call out to her, to ask what she was doing, but of course, no sound came out. I couldn't even move my lips. The sleep paralysis had me completely locked in place. The girl wandered around the room, moving in and out of my field of vision. She went to the dresser and seemed to be looking at the items on top. Then she walked to the closet and stood there for a moment, her back to me. The whole time I was thinking, "Anna, go back to bed. What are you doing up so late?" Then it hit me. I turned my eyes, the only part of me I could move, to look at my cousins again. Jenny was still against the wall, and Lily was still in the middle. Both were sound asleep. If they were here, then who was walking around our room? My heart started racing. I wanted to wake my cousins, to scream, to do anything, but I was completely helpless. I could only watch as this strange child moved around our room in the middle of the night. The girl turned around and walked toward the foot of the bed. That's when I got a clear look at her face in the moonlight. It definitely wasn't Anna. This girl had different features, rounder face, wider eyes, and there was something about her expression that was just empty. Not sad or happy or scared, just blank. She stood at the foot of the bed, staring directly at me. I swear she knew I was awake. She knew I could see her. Then the most horrifying thing happened. She slowly began to climb onto the bed frame. Not like a normal kid would climb onto a bed. She didn't use her hands to hoist herself up. She just pulled herself up in one fluid motion and started crawling toward me on all fours, moving over the footboard and onto the mattress. I was in full panic mode now. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I was screaming inside my head, begging my body to move, to do something, anything. As she crawled closer, I caught her reflection in the mirror across the room. But what I saw made no sense. In the mirror, she wasn't on the bed at all. She was standing by the closet, completely still, staring at me through the reflection, but I could feel the mattress dipping slightly as she crawled up by our feet. How could she be in two places at once? When she reached the middle of the bed, right by Lily's feet, I felt something break through the paralysis. It was like a surge of adrenaline finally connected my brain to my muscles. I gasped loudly and sat bolt upright in bed, my whole body shaking. The room was empty. The door was closed. No little girl on the bed, no little girl by the closet. My cousin stirred beside me, disturbed by my sudden movement. "Vic, what's wrong?" Jenny mumbled, half asleep. I was breathing hard, sweating despite the cool night air. "Nothing," I whispered. "Bad dream. Go back to sleep." I sat there for almost an hour, afraid to lie back down, afraid to close my eyes. I kept staring at the door, half expecting it to swing open again. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I fell into a restless sleep with the lights on. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had just been a particularly vivid episode of sleep paralysis, but something about it felt different from my previous experiences. It felt real. At breakfast, I casually asked Tita Elena if Anna ever sleepwalks. "Anna? No, never. Why do you ask?" she said while flipping pancakes, just wondering. "I thought I heard someone walking around last night." Tita Elena gave me a curious look. "Anna was with me all night. She had a fever, so she slept in our room." A chill ran down my spine. If Anna had been with her parents all night, then who was the little girl I saw? I didn't want to freak anyone out, especially with the wedding the next day, so I kept quiet. But the image of that girl stayed with me. Her blank stare, the way she moved, how she seemed to be in two places at once. That afternoon, needing some time alone to clear my head, I decided to take a walk. My grandparents' house was just down the road, and behind it was the small cemetery where many of our relatives were buried. It was a peaceful place with mango trees providing shade over the graves. I'd always found it comforting rather than scary, even as a kid. I walked among the headstones, stopping at my great-grandparents' graves to say a silent prayer. As I stood there, I noticed a smaller headstone nearby that I didn't remember from previous visits. Curious, I walked over to take a closer look. The headstone was weathered but not ancient. There was a small oval photograph embedded in the stone, protected by a layer of glass, as is common in Filipino graves. When I saw the picture, my blood turned to ice. It was her. The same girl who had visited our room last night. The same shoulder-length bob haircut, the same round face, the same wide eyes. There was no mistake. My legs nearly gave out from under me. I crouched down to read the inscription. The girl's name was Maria Cristina Santos. She had died in 1982 at the age of 7. The date showed she'd been born in 1975, more than 20 years before I was even born. According to the headstone, she was the daughter of Roberto and Luisa Santos. The surnames were familiar, but I couldn't immediately place how they were related to us. I practically ran back to my grandparents' house, finding my grandmother in the kitchen preparing food for the wedding reception. "Lola," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who was Maria Cristina Santos?" My grandmother stopped what she was doing and looked at me with surprise. "Where did you hear that name?" "I saw her grave in the cemetery. Was she related to us?" Lola wiped her hands on her apron and sat down at the kitchen table, motioning for me to join her. "Yes, she was your mother's cousin, your second cousin, I suppose. Roberto Santos was my nephew." "What happened to her?" I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. "It was a terrible accident," Lola said, her voice softening. "She was playing near the river during the rainy season. The current was strong that year. They found her body 2 days later. downstream. She crossed herself. Why are you asking about Christina after all these years? I couldn't tell her the truth. I just said I'd noticed the grave and was curious. It was very sad, Lola continued. She was such a sweet child, always quiet, always watching. Your mother used to play with her when we visited. They were close despite the age difference. Did she? I hesitated, not sure how to ask. Did she ever stay in this house? Yes, many times. The Santos family lived far from town, so when they visited, they would stay here. Christina used to sleep in the room you're sharing with Jenny and Lily. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. The room where I'd seen her. Is there a picture of her somewhere, besides the one on the grave? I asked. Lola thought for a moment, then got up and went to the old cabinet where she kept photo albums. She pulled out a dusty one and flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. Here, she said, pointing to a faded color photograph. It showed a family gathering, similar to the one we were having for the wedding. And there in the front row, standing slightly apart from the other children, was Maria Cristina. She wore the same blank expression I'd seen the night before, and she was wearing a white dress. I've never been able to explain what happened that night. Was it really just sleep paralysis and a coincidence that I saw the grave the next day? Or did Christina's spirit somehow reach out to me, another young woman sleeping in her old room? I don't know, but sometimes I still dream about her, standing by that closet, watching me through the mirror, and I wake up with the feeling that I'm not alone. Or so cargo. Story 16. I've been debating whether to share this for years. It happened back in '98 when I was helping out at our small Baptist church in Flint. Even now, typing this makes my hands shake a little. I've seen a lot in my years of faith, but nothing like what happened with Valerie. She started coming to our Sunday services that spring with her husband, Frank. They'd sit near the back, and I remember noticing how thin she was. Couldn't have been more than 100 pounds soaking wet. She had this long dark hair that was always perfectly styled, and these intense eyes that seemed to be taking everything in. Frank was friendly enough, would chat with folks after service, but Valerie always seemed hesitant, like she was studying us. After a few weeks, she started talking more with some of the ladies in the congregation. That's when bits of her background began to surface. She came from a family of practicing witches, not the kind you see in movies, but real practitioners of what they called the craft. Her mother and grandmother had passed down spell books, divination tools, and all kinds of occult objects to her over the years. What really got me was when she mentioned casually to my wife that she consulted her Ouija board for everything: what to eat for dinner, what to wear, whether to go shopping. Everything. She'd been doing this daily since she was a teenager. Some people have morning coffee. Valerie had morning Ouija sessions. About a month after she started attending, Valerie approached Pastor Mike after service and said she wanted to become a Christian. She was crying, saying she felt empty inside despite all her practices and wanted something real. Pastor Mike was thrilled. We all were. She made a public profession of faith the next Sunday. That's when things started going sideways. The first thing we noticed was that Valerie stopped showing up regularly. When she did come, she looked terrible, pale, shaky, with dark circles under her eyes. Frank would practically have to hold her up as they walked in. After 3 weeks of spotty attendance, Frank pulled Pastor Mike aside and explained what was happening. Every Sunday morning, like clockwork, about an hour before church, Valerie would get violently ill, vomiting, shaking, cold sweats. She'd be fine the rest of the week, but as soon as Sunday morning came around, it was like her body was rejecting the very idea of coming to church. But that wasn't the worst of it. Frank told Pastor Mike that Valerie had been seeing things in their house, black shapes moving in the corners of rooms, standing at the foot of their bed at night. Objects would move or disappear. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly for no reason. Their dog refused to enter certain parts of the house. Pastor Mike suggested Valerie come anyway, even if she wasn't feeling well. The next Sunday, she showed up with a small bucket. She sat in the very back row, and I could hear her retching into that bucket through the entire service. The sounds she made weren't normal. There was something guttural and wrong about them. This went on for several Sundays. What really stands out in my memory was the day Pastor Mike finally convinced Valerie to meet with him and a few of us deacons after service. We gathered in his office, me, Pastor Mike, Deacon Thompson, Deacon Williams, Frank, and Valerie. She looked awful. Her skin had a grayish tinge, and she kept twitching like she was fighting to keep still. "Valerie, we're concerned about what's happening to you," Pastor Mike started. "Frank's told us about the things you've been seeing at home." She nodded slightly, her eyes darting around the room like she was watching something move. "I think—" She started, then stopped. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I think something's angry with me for leaving." "What do you mean?" Pastor Mike asked. "The spirits I worked with. They don't want me to leave them. They're punishing me." She suddenly looked directly at Pastor Mike with an intensity that made him flinch. "They're in the room with us right now." I remember the chill that went through me at those words. I found myself looking at the corners of the office, half expecting to see something. Pastor Mike asked her more questions about her practice, about the items she had at home. As she spoke, her voice kept changing, sometimes high and childlike, sometimes deeper, almost masculine. It wasn't like a performance, it was subtle, like she wasn't aware she was doing it. "I think we need to consider that Valerie might be experiencing demonic oppression or even possession," Pastor Mike finally said. "The first step is to remove all occult items from your home." Valerie's face twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "They won't like that." We agreed to go to their house that afternoon. I'll never forget walking into that place. It looked normal enough from the outside, typical suburban home with a well-kept lawn, but the moment I stepped through the door, I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. The air felt thick, like walking through invisible cobwebs. Frank led us to their bedroom, where Valerie kept most of her things in an antique trunk at the foot of the bed. When he opened it, I nearly gagged at the smell that came out, musty and rotten, like something had died in there. Inside were dozens of books with strange symbols on their covers, bundles of herbs tied with human hair, jars of things I couldn't identify, crystals, candles, and an ornate Ouija board that looked ancient. "My grandmother's," Valerie said, standing in the doorway. "It's been in the family for generations." As we started to carefully place the items into garbage bags, Valerie became increasingly agitated. She paced the hallway, muttering to herself. At one point she screamed, "Don't touch that," when Pastor Mike picked up a small leather-bound book. She rushed forward and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Valerie," Frank said gently, "we talked about this. It all has to go." She released Pastor Mike's wrist, but continued to watch us with hostile eyes that didn't seem like her own. By the time we finished, we had 3 large garbage bags full of occult items. Pastor Mike said a prayer in each room of the house, and we agreed to meet at the church the next day. The plan was to burn the items in a controlled setting and then perform what Pastor Mike carefully called a deliverance ministry for Valerie. He didn't use the word exorcism. That felt too Catholic, too Hollywood for our Baptist church. But that's exactly what it was. The next day was when everything came to a head. It was a Wednesday, and the church was empty except for our small group, Pastor Mike, 3 deacons, including myself, Frank, and Valerie. We gathered in the sanctuary around 11 in the morning. Valerie looked worse than ever. Her skin was waxy and pale, and she moved like her joints hurt. We started with prayer, forming a circle around Valerie, who sat in a chair in the center. Pastor Mike had his Bible open to passages he'd marked, verses about Jesus casting out demons. As soon as he began reading, Valerie started to shake. "In the name of Jesus Christ," Pastor Mike read, "I command any unclean spirit to leave this child of God." That's when it happened. Valerie's head snapped back so violently I thought she'd broken her neck. A foam started forming at the corners of her mouth, and she made a sound I will never forget as long as I live. A deep, rumbling growl that couldn't possibly have come from her small frame. Her eyes rolled back until only the whites showed, and she began speaking in a language none of us recognized. It wasn't speaking in tongues like you sometimes see in charismatic churches. This was different, older sounding, with harsh consonants that made my ears hurt. Frank moved to hold her hand, but as soon as he touched her, she grabbed him with impossible strength and threw him across the room. He crashed into the first row of pews, stunned. Deacon Williams and I rushed to restrain her, but it was like trying to hold down something much larger and stronger than the 95-pound woman we knew. She threw us off like we were nothing, sending Deacon Williams sprawling into the communion table and me into the wall. "Keep reading," Deacon Thompson shouted to Pastor Mike, who had stopped in shock. Pastor Mike continued, his voice shaking but growing stronger with each verse. "The Lord rebuke you. By the authority of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave." Valerie, or whatever was speaking through her, laughed. It was a horrible sound, like multiple voices layered on top of each other. "We are many," the voice said. "We have been with her always. She is ours." What followed was the most grueling 3 hours of my life. Valerie alternated between violent outbursts and periods of eerie calm where she would stare at one of us and reveal personal secrets no one could have known. She told Pastor Mike about a sin from his college years he'd never confessed to anyone. She knew about my brother's struggle with addiction that I'd told no one in the church. Her small body displayed strength that defied explanation. At one point, it took all 4 of us men to hold her down, and even then, she nearly broke free multiple times. She vomited a black substance that smelled like sulfur, and the temperature in the sanctuary dropped so low we could see our breath. Throughout it all, Pastor Mike continued reading scripture, praying and commanding the spirits to leave in Jesus' name. Gradually, the episodes became less violent. After 3 hours, Valerie suddenly went limp in the chair. We all fell silent, watching her. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes clear for the first time that day. "Is it over?" she asked in her normal voice, looking confused and exhausted. We thought it was, we really did. Frank took her home, and we all went back to our lives, shaken but believing we'd witnessed a miracle. 3 days later, though, Frank called Pastor Mike in a panic. Their 10-year-old son was seeing shadows in his room at night, tall, thin shapes that stood in the corners watching him. Pastor Mike and I went back to their house that evening. The boy Tommy was clearly terrified, refusing to go into his bedroom. Pastor Mike asked if we could have missed anything during our cleanup of Valerie's items. "I don't think so," Frank said. "We got everything from the trunk, but something was nagging at me. What about Tommy's room? Did Valerie ever keep any of her things in there?" Tommy looked up. "Mom gave me a special book for my birthday last year. It has a unicorn on it." We followed Tommy to his bookshelf, where he pulled out what looked like a children's fantasy novel with a white unicorn on the cover. As soon as he handed it to Pastor Mike, I felt that same oppressive feeling from before. Pastor Mike opened it and found that while the cover looked innocent, the inside had been hollowed out and filled with small occult objects, a tiny crystal, a lock of hair, symbols drawn on parchment. "This is the last one," Pastor Mike said with certainty. "This is what's anchoring them here." We took the book outside and burned it in their backyard grill. As the flames consumed it, I swear I heard a high-pitched whining noise that made my teeth hurt. Tommy reported no more shadows after that night. Valerie continued coming to church, growing stronger each week. The vomiting stopped. The color returned to her face. She even started helping with the children's ministry. My family ended up moving to a different church when I was about 6 years old, but I heard from friends that Valerie remained an active member for years. To this day, I can't explain what I saw in that sanctuary. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my mind, wondering if there's some rational explanation. But then I remember the inhuman strength, the voices, the things she knew that she couldn't have known. Whatever happened that day was real, and it changed how I see the world. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I see a tall, thin shadow standing in the corner of my bedroom, watching me with eyes I can't see but somehow feel. Story 17. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts. Sarah used to tease me about it all the time. how I'd roll my eyes at her ghost hunting shows, or how I'd come up with logical explanations for every paranormal thing she'd point out. We were opposites that way. She believed in everything: spirits, signs, the universe sending messages. I was the rational one, feet firmly planted in reality. At least that's who I was until last December. Sarah and I had been married for 7 years when she hurt her back at work. She was a nurse, always on her feet, and one day she bent down to help a patient and something just gave out. The doctors prescribed opioids for the pain. You probably know where this is going. What started as legitimate pain management spiraled into dependency. It was subtle at first, needing refills earlier than expected, mood swings, nodding off during conversations. By the time I fully understood what was happening, she was already in deep. The next 2 years were a blur of rehab centers, relapses, tears, and promises. I almost gave up so many times, but somehow, against the odds, she pulled through. Those last 6 months were the best we'd had in years. She was clean, working part-time at a different clinic, going to meetings. We were rebuilding our marriage, rediscovering each other. I remember thinking, we actually made it through the worst. Then came May 2nd, 2018. I found her in our bathroom. She must have gotten the fentanyl from someone at work. The medical examiner said it was instant. Her body wasn't used to opioids anymore, and fentanyl is so much stronger than what she'd taken before. I keep telling myself she didn't suffer, but that doesn't really help when I wake up at 3 in the morning, alone in our bed. The months after her death passed in a fog. I went to work, paid bills, occasionally showered. People call it functioning, but that's a generous term for what I was doing. I was a machine running on minimal power, just enough to keep from shutting down completely. As Thanksgiving approached, I realized Christmas would follow, and Sarah's family was dreading the holidays without her. Sarah was the baker in the family. Every Christmas, she'd make these incredible cookies and pastries, recipes passed down from her grandmother. Her mom mentioned how much they'd miss that tradition, and something in me just decided I would try to fill that gap. Now let me be clear, I am not a baker. I can make a decent omelet and heat up a frozen pizza, but that's the extent of my culinary expertise. But Sarah had kept all her recipes in this little floral notebook, and I thought, how hard could it be? Incredibly hard, as it turns out. My first attempt at her cinnamon star cookies looked like burned ninja stars. The second batch wasn't much better, but by the third try, they were at least recognizable as cookies. I spent an entire weekend in December tackling her recipes one by one. The gingerbread, the rum balls, the weird little almond things her dad loved. My kitchen looked like a flower bomb had gone off, but by Sunday night, I had decent versions of all her Christmas specialties. I packed everything up and delivered them to her family members, her parents, her sister, her aunt, who lived nearby. They cried, of course. I cried too. But there was something healing about it, like I was keeping a piece of her alive. They all insisted the cookies tasted just like hers, which was either a kind lie or a Christmas miracle. I got home around 9 that night, exhausted but feeling lighter than I had in months. The kitchen was still a disaster, bowls and measuring cups everywhere, flour dusting every surface. I filled the sink with soapy water and started washing dishes, my mind replaying the grateful looks on her family's faces. That's when it happened. I was elbow deep in suds when I felt it, a hand on my lower back. Not a vague pressure, not a brush of fabric, but 5 distinct fingers pressing gently against my spine, just above my waistband. The touch was so specific, so unmistakably a hand, that I didn't even jump. I just froze, dishes forgotten. The weird part, I wasn't scared, not even for a second. Instead, this profound sense of calm washed over me, like being wrapped in a warm blanket on a cold night. I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't alone in that kitchen. I slowly turned around, half expecting to see I don't know what. But there was nothing there, just my empty kitchen, dusted with flour and sugar. The hand was gone, but that feeling of warmth lingered for several minutes before gradually fading. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a draft hitting my shirt in just the right way, or my brain playing tricks after an emotional day. but deep down I knew what it was, or rather, who it was. I finished the dishes and went to bed, falling into the deepest, most peaceful sleep I'd had since she died. 3 days later, it happened again. I was in bed, that foggy state between awake and asleep, when I felt the mattress dip behind me. It was the distinctive feeling of someone crawling into bed, the shift of weight, the slight pull of the sheets. My first bleary thought was that one of the neighborhood cats had somehow gotten in. Sarah used to leave the window open for strays in summer. I swung my arm back to shoo it away. My hand met nothing but empty space and cool sheets. Yet the pressure remained, the unmistakable feeling of a body next to mine, and then that same warmth spread through me, that same incredible sense of peace. I lay there, barely breathing, afraid to move and break whatever spell had settled over the room. "Sarah?" I whispered into the darkness. Nothing answered, but the warmth intensified, like someone had turned up a dimmer switch on that feeling of calm. I swear the air felt different too, heavier somehow, charged with something I couldn't explain. I don't know how long I lay there, but eventually I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up the next morning, the other side of the bed was empty and cold, like always. But something had changed. I had changed. Look, I know how this sounds. If someone had told me this story a year ago, I would have nodded politely while mentally diagnosing them with grief-induced hallucinations. But when you experience something like this, it's different. It's not like seeing a shape in the shadows that might be a ghost, or hearing a weird noise that could be explained away. The hand on my back, the presence in my bed, they were as real as anything I've ever felt. Over the next few weeks, it happened a few more times, always when I was alone, usually when I was doing something connected to Sarah in some way, once while I was looking through our photo albums, another time when I was wearing her favorite sweatshirt I'd found in the back of the closet. Each time, that same touch, that same warmth, that same absolute certainty that she was there. The last time it happened was Christmas Eve. I'd gone to her parents' house for dinner, then come home to an empty apartment that felt especially hollow on a night meant for family. I was sitting on the couch, nursing a whiskey, when I felt her sit down beside me. No hand this time, just the cushion compressing, and that now familiar warmth spreading through my side. I didn't turn to look. I didn't need to. Instead, I just whispered, "Thank you. I miss you and I love you." The pressure on the couch intensified for a moment. The warmth became almost overwhelming, and then it was gone. Not just the feeling on the couch, but that sense of presence that had been appearing on and off for weeks. I knew immediately that something had changed, that whatever door had temporarily opened between us had gently closed. She hasn't come back since then. Sometimes I think maybe she just needed to know I'd be okay. Or maybe she wanted to thank me for connecting with her family through those damn cookies. Or maybe I really am just a grief-stricken man whose mind created exactly what he needed in that moment. But I don't think so. I can't prove what happened. I don't have EVPs or ghost photos or whatever else those paranormal shows are always after. All I have is the absolute certainty that for a brief time this past December, my wife came back to say goodbye. I'm not a skeptic anymore. I don't roll my eyes at ghost stories or dismiss people's supernatural experiences. How could I, when I've felt the impossible with my own body? Some things in this world defy explanation, and I've made peace with that. Sometimes, when I'm washing dishes or lying in bed nearly asleep, I find myself hoping for that touch again. It hasn't come. But the memory of it, the absolute certainty that love somehow transcended death, even if just for a moment, that stays with me, and in some ways, maybe that's enough. Story 18. I still can't explain what happened that Halloween weekend back in 2015. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, trying to find some logical explanation, but there just isn't one. I'm not normally the type to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, but after what happened in Tyler's bathroom, I'm not so sure anymore. It was the last weekend of October, and I'd driven up to Portland to visit my friend Tyler for Halloween weekend. We had tickets to the Trailblazers season opener on Saturday night, which happened to fall on Halloween that year. I was pretty excited about it. We'd been planning this little trip for months. Tyler lived in this old house in southeast Portland with 3 other roommates. The place had to be at least 100 years old. All creaky wooden floors, weird little nooks and crannies, and these super tall ceilings. It had character, as realtors like to say, but it also had that particular smell that old houses get, like old wood and slightly damp wallpaper. The house had some odd features that you just don't see in modern construction. One of the strangest was this laundry chute in the upstairs bathroom. It was basically a square hole in the floor, about 12 inches across, with a little hinged door covering it. The chute connected directly to the basement cellar where they kept their washer and dryer. Tyler once mentioned the previous owners had kids who would drop toys down it for fun, watching them tumble all the way to the basement. That basement was creepy as hell. The one time Tyler showed me around down there, I noticed all this abandoned furniture from previous tenants pushed against the walls. Old chairs with the stuffing coming out, a wooden desk with one leg missing, even an ancient baby cradle that gave me the creeps. Everything was covered in dust and cobwebs. I remember joking that it looked like the set of a horror movie, and Tyler just laughed and said, "Wait till you see it at night." Anyway, on Halloween day, we were getting ready to head to the game. Tyler had this whole plan that we should paint our faces in Blazers colors, red and black, so we'd look festive but also Halloween appropriate. I'm not great with makeup, but I figured I could manage some basic face paint. I went up to the bathroom around 6 in the evening to start getting ready. The bathroom was small but functional, with this old porcelain sink and a medicine cabinet with a mirror above it. The laundry chute was in the corner by the toilet, which was next to a little metal shelf unit where they kept extra toilet paper and towels. I remember setting up my makeup bag on the sink edge and getting out my black eyeliner. I was leaning in close to the mirror, trying to get a straight line, when I felt something. It's hard to describe exactly, but the air in the room suddenly felt different. It was like when you're a kid playing hide and seek and you're hidden really well, but somehow you just know the person who's it is about to find you. That fluttery, anxious feeling in your stomach. The bathroom had gone eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the old house, the distant voices of Tyler's roommates downstairs, the creaking of the pipes, the hum of the heating system, all seemed to fade away. I felt the hair on my arms stand up, and my breath caught in my throat. I was still frozen in that position, eyeliner poised against my eyelid when I saw it happen in the mirror. On the shelf next to the toilet was a fresh pack of toilet paper, with maybe 5 or 6 rolls stacked in a pyramid. The top roll suddenly tipped over, landing on its side on the shelf. At first I thought, okay, it just fell over, no big deal. But then it started to unravel, by itself. With absolutely no provocation. The toilet paper roll began spinning slowly at first, then picking up speed. The white paper unfurled across the bathroom floor like some kind of bizarre snake. I couldn't move. I just stood there watching in the mirror, eyeliner still in hand, as this toilet paper roll emptied itself onto the floor. There was no draft in the bathroom, no fan running, no open window, nothing that could possibly explain why this roll was unwinding itself at an increasingly rapid pace. The toilet paper created a trail across the floor, heading directly toward the laundry chute in the corner. When the paper reached the chute, it kept going, sliding down into the darkness below. I watched, completely stunned, as foot after foot of toilet paper disappeared down that hole. Finally, the roll was completely empty. The cardboard tube spun a few more times, then wobbled and became still. I could see my reflection in the mirror. My face had gone completely white, my eyes wide with shock, my hand still frozen with the eyeliner. I don't know how long I stood there, unable to move. It could have been seconds or minutes. Then came a knock at the bathroom door that nearly made me jump out of my skin. "Jamie, you okay in there? We need to leave in 20 minutes. It was Tyler. I couldn't find my voice at first. My throat felt dry, constricted. When I finally managed to speak, my voice came out as a croak. Yeah, just a minute." I splashed some cold water on my face, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Tyler took one look at me and frowned. "Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" I tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out all jumbled. The toilet paper, it just, by itself, down the chute. Tyler stared at me like I was speaking another language. What are you talking about? The toilet paper unrolled itself, all by itself, and went down the laundry chute. He laughed, clearly thinking I was messing with him. Right, good one. Halloween pranks already. I'm serious, Tyler, I didn't touch it, it just happened. Something in my voice or expression must have convinced him I wasn't joking. His smile faded. That's weird. Really weird. Then his face changed, like he'd suddenly remembered something. Wait, hold on, come with me. He turned and headed for the stairs that led to the basement. I hesitated. The last place I wanted to go was that creepy basement, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed him down the narrow staircase, holding tightly to the railing. The basement was even creepier than I remembered. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor and illuminating all that abandoned furniture in the corners. The washer and dryer stood against one wall, underneath the spot where the laundry chute emptied out, and there, on the floor in front of the dryer, was the toilet paper. But it wasn't in a messy pile like you'd expect. It was arranged in perfect zigzags, folded back and forth as if someone had carefully arranged it. It looked almost like one of those paper fans you make in elementary school, except it stretched about 6 feet across the basement floor. Tyler turned to me, his face pale in the dim light. I came down here to grab a clean sweatshirt from the dryer when I saw this. I thought you had done it as some kind of weird joke. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was standing at the mirror the whole time. I watched it happen through the reflection. We both stared at the perfectly arranged toilet paper. There was no way it could have fallen down that chute and landed like that. It was impossible. Could one of your roommates be messing with us? I asked, desperate for some rational explanation. Tyler shook his head. Mark and Jesse are both at work, and David left this morning to visit his parents for the weekend. There's nobody else in the house but us. We stood there in silence for a long moment, both of us trying to process what we were seeing. The basement felt colder than it should have, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Let's get out of here, I finally said, and Tyler nodded quickly in agreement. We didn't talk much on the way to the game. Both of us were lost in our own thoughts, trying to come up with logical explanations for what had happened. Gas leak causing hallucinations, some kind of elaborate prank by one of his roommates, a bizarre coincidence involving gravity and air currents. None of the explanations fit. We both knew it. The strange thing is, as supernatural experiences go, it was pretty harmless. No one got hurt, nothing was damaged, just a roll of toilet paper that unspooled itself and somehow arranged itself into neat folds in the basement. But the sheer impossibility of it, the clear indication that something or someone invisible was manipulating physical objects right in front of us, that's what made it so terrifying. We tried to enjoy the basketball game, but I kept thinking about going back to that house afterward. Tyler must have been thinking the same thing, because halfway through the third quarter, he leaned over and said, "You can stay at my friend Amber's place tonight if you want. She's having a Halloween party anyway." I nodded gratefully. There was no way I was going back to that house to sleep. Later, after a few drinks at Amber's party had calmed our nerves, Tyler and I finally talked about what had happened. "Do you think your house is haunted?" I asked him. He shrugged. "I don't know. Weird stuff has happened before, but nothing this obvious. Doors closing by themselves, things not being where I left them. I always just blamed it on old house noises or forgetfulness." "You think it was trying to communicate something, or just messing with us because it's Halloween?" "If it was trying to communicate, toilet paper seems like a weird choice," Tyler said with a small laugh. "Maybe it was just a playful ghost, like, 'Happy Halloween, humans. Watch me do this toilet paper trick.'" We tried to joke about it, to make light of the situation, but I could tell Tyler was as unsettled as I was. He moved out of that house about 3 months later, claiming it was because the commute to his new job was too long. but I always wondered if there were other incidents after I left. I've told this story to a few close friends over the years, and the reactions are always mixed. Some people think I'm making it up or exaggerating. Others suggest scientific explanations involving air pressure or static electricity. A few believe me completely and share their own ghost stories in return. The truth is, I don't know what happened in that bathroom on Halloween 2015. I only know what I saw and what Tyler and I found in the basement afterward. It wasn't violent or malevolent. In fact, if ghosts are real, this one seemed almost playful, like it was pulling its own Halloween prank on the living. But even now, 8 years later, whenever I see a roll of toilet paper, I can't help but remember standing frozen in that bathroom, watching through the mirror as something invisible manipulated physical reality right before my eyes. And I still find myself checking just to make sure my toilet paper stays exactly where I put it. Story 19. I still get goosebumps whenever it rains at night. It's been almost 20 years since it happened, but the memory is burned into my mind like it was yesterday. I've never shared this outside my family before, but I need to tell someone who might understand. I grew up in rural Colombia, in a small farmhouse nestled between rolling hills, about 2 hours from the nearest town. This was back in the early 90s, before electricity had reached our remote area. We lived simply. My grandfather, my Aunt Elena with her husband and 2 children, and me. My parents had died in an accident when I was 4, and my grandfather had raised me since then. Our house wasn't fancy, just stone walls, wooden floors, and a tin roof that amplified every raindrop during storms. We used candles and oil lamps for light, and the nights were incredibly dark when clouds covered the moon and stars. The rainy season that year had been particularly brutal. The dirt road to town had turned into mud, essentially cutting us off from the rest of the world for days at a time. We were used to this isolation, though. My grandfather was prepared with enough supplies to last us through these periods. That night, I'll never forget it, was the 27th of November, 1993. The rain had been pouring for 3 straight days, relentless and heavy, the kind that makes you wonder if it will ever stop. Lightning flashed constantly, making the night seem like a broken strobe light, and thunder shook our little house to its foundation. I was 14 then, sharing a room with my cousins Carlos and Lucia, who were 8 and 10. We'd gone to bed around 9, as we usually did. With no TV or electric lights, our days followed the sun. I remember lying awake listening to the storm rage outside, watching shadows dance across the ceiling as lightning illuminated our room through the thin curtains. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a sound that didn't belong to the storm. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Someone knocking on our front door. I sat up in bed, disoriented, trying to figure out if I'd dreamed it. Carlos and Lucia were still asleep. Then it came again. 3 loud, distinct knocks that somehow cut through the sound of the pounding rain. Knock. Knock, knock. I looked at the small clock beside my bed. It was 12 minutes past 1 in the morning. Who would be at our door at this hour, in this weather? The nearest neighbor was at least 3 kilometers away, and the road was practically impassable. I heard movement in the hallway, my grandfather's heavy footsteps. I slipped out of bed and cracked open our bedroom door. By the flickering light of his candle, I could see him moving toward the front door, machete in his other hand. His face was set in stern lines, his gray hair wild from sleep. My Aunt Elena and her husband Pablo emerged from their room, whispering urgently. "Who could it be at this hour?" Elena asked, wrapping her shawl tightly around her nightgown. "Maybe someone's in trouble," Pablo suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. My grandfather reached the door and called out in a voice that was surprisingly steady. "¿Quién es? Who's there?" Silence, just the sound of rain hammering against the roof and windows. "¿Quién es?" he repeated, louder this time. Still nothing. I crept further down the hallway, drawn by a mix of curiosity and fear. My aunt noticed me and motioned for me to stay back, but I ignored her. I wanted to see. My grandfather looked back at us, his face illuminated by the candle he held. He seemed unsure for a moment, then set his jaw with determination. He slid the heavy wooden bolt and opened the door a crack, peering out into the stormy night. The sound of the rain intensified with the door open, a roaring, rushing sound. Cold, damp air swept into the house, making the candle flame dance wildly. My grandfather opened the door wider and stepped onto the covered porch, still clutching his machete. I moved closer, ignoring my aunt's whispered protests. From where I stood, I could see the porch was empty, just darkness and sheets of rain beyond the protection of the roof. My grandfather walked the length of the porch, holding his candle high, peering into the darkness. The rain had soaked the bottom of his pajama pants, and his feet were muddy. After a minute or two, he came back inside, his expression puzzled and annoyed. "There's nobody," he said, closing the door firmly and sliding the bolt back into place. Probably just the wind moving something against the door. But we all knew it wasn't the wind. Those knocks had been too deliberate, too human. "Let's go back to bed," my grandfather said, trying to sound reassuring. It was nothing. My aunt and uncle nodded reluctantly and turned back toward their room. I lingered in the hallway, watching my grandfather. He caught my eye and gave me a small smile. "Go to sleep, Maria," he said gently. "Everything is fine." I nodded and turned back toward my room, but I didn't believe him. Something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I had a heaviness in my stomach that I couldn't explain. I had just reached my bedroom door when it happened again. Knock, 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 louder than before, more urgent, more demanding. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. My aunt gasped from down the hall. My grandfather turned sharply, his face hardening. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled, striding back to the front door, the machete gripped tightly in his hand. His candle cast wild, dancing shadows as he moved. "Papa, wait," my aunt called, but he ignored her. I should have gone into my room. I should have crawled back into bed and pulled the covers over my head. But instead, I followed him, drawn by something I couldn't explain. My grandfather reached for the door handle, his movements angry and determined. But as his fingers touched the metal, he suddenly went still, completely still, like a statue. The door was already partially open. A thin stream of rainwater was trickling in underneath it, forming a small puddle on our wooden floor. My grandfather looked down, and in the candlelight, I saw his face change. The anger drained away, replaced by something I'd never seen in him before. Fear. Because there, leading from the crack in the door across our floor, were wet footprints. They weren't the prints of my grandfather's feet. These were different, larger, and they hadn't been there minutes before when he'd returned inside. The footprints led from the door into our house. "Get back," my grandfather whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Everyone, get back to your rooms, now." My aunt and uncle retreated immediately, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at those wet footprints on our floor. My grandfather slowly pushed the door open wider, raising his machete. The wind gusted in, nearly extinguishing his candle. He shielded the flame with his hand and peered outside once more. Nothing, just rain and darkness. He closed the door firmly and slid the bolt into place. Then he turned to me, his face pale in the candlelight. "Maria, go to your room and stay there. Push your dresser against the door." "But abuelo." "Now, Maria." I'd never heard that tone from him before. I nodded and hurried back to my room. Carlos and Lucia were somehow still asleep, oblivious to everything. I pushed my heavy wooden dresser against the door as quietly as I could, then sat on my bed, trembling. The footprints had been wet, fresh. Someone, or something, had entered our house while my grandfather was checking the porch. But how? He'd been right there. He would have seen anyone coming in, unless... I hugged my knees to my chest, listening intently. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside our house, an unnatural silence had fallen. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Minutes passed, maybe an hour, I don't know. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Then I heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard in the hallway outside our bedroom. Then another, slow, deliberate steps approaching our door. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. The footsteps stopped right outside our room. I stared at the door. At the small gap between it and the floor, a shadow moved across that gap, blocking the faint light from the hallway. Something was standing right outside our door. I held my breath, praying the dresser would hold. The doorknob turned slowly, testing. Finding resistance, it stopped. The shadow remained. I don't know how long it stood there. It felt like forever. Eventually, the shadow moved away, and I heard those slow, deliberate footsteps moving down the hallway toward my grandfather's room. I wanted to call out, to warn him, but terror had stolen my voice. I sat there, paralyzed, as the footsteps faded. Then I heard my grandfather's voice, sharp with alarm. "Kien anda hi? Who's there?" Silence followed. Complete silence. Then the screaming started. Not human screaming, something else. A high, keening wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It rose above the sound of the storm, filling our little house with its unearthly cry. My cousins finally woke up, confused and frightened. I pulled them both into my bed, covering them with blankets, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. The wailing continued for what seemed like an eternity, then cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through our window. The storm had passed. Birds were singing outside. It took all my courage to move the dresser and open our bedroom door. The hallway was empty. The wooden floors were dry, no sign of the wet footprints from the night before. I found my grandfather in the kitchen, making coffee on our wood stove as if it were any normal morning. My aunt and uncle were there too, unnaturally quiet. "Abuelo?" I said hesitantly. "What happened last night?" He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he shook his head slightly. "We don't talk about it," he said quietly. "Some things are better left unsaid." I never did get a clear explanation of what happened that night. My grandfather refused to discuss it, and eventually the rest of the family followed his lead, pretending it never occurred. But I know what I saw, those wet footprints, that shadow under the door. We moved to the city the following month. My grandfather said it was so we children could get better schooling, but I knew the real reason. To this day, I can't sleep when it rains at night. I lie awake, listening, half expecting to hear those 3 deliberate knocks on my door. Knock, knock, knock. I still don't know what visited us that night or why it came. But sometimes in my dreams, I see those wet footprints leading into our house, and I wonder, did it ever really leave? Story 20. I still don't know if I should be writing this. I've barely told anyone about what happened because, honestly, who would believe me? But I can't stop thinking about it, and maybe putting it all down will help me process things. I've changed our names just in case, but everything else is exactly how it happened. About 7 months ago, my friend, I'll call her Jess, and I moved into this old duplex in our hometown. We're both 19, had been working full-time since graduating high school, and were beyond excited to finally move out of our parents' houses. The place belonged to my mom, which meant cheap rent, a total win for 2 broke teenagers trying to adult. The duplex was built around 1915, with all those charming old house features, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, built-in cabinets with glass doors. It needed some updating, but it had character, you know. My mom had owned it for years as a rental property, but decided to let us live there after the previous tenants moved out. She'd had it professionally cleaned and repainted before we moved in. Moving day was exhausting but fun. Our parents helped us haul furniture, and my mom gifted us this gorgeous rose gold knife set for our kitchen. Like, really nice quality with these beautiful handles. Jess and I spent that first night drinking cheap wine on our lumpy second-hand couch, feeling like we'd finally made it to adulthood. Looking back, the weird stuff started immediately, but we didn't recognize it as weird yet. We just thought we were being forgetful or clumsy. 3 days after moving in, I used one of the knives from our new set to cut up some vegetables for dinner. I distinctly remember washing it and placing it in the drying rack. The next morning, it was gone. Jess and I tore apart the kitchen looking for it, checked the trash, under appliances, everywhere. It had completely vanished. "Did you take it to your room for some reason?" Jess asked me. "Why would I take a kitchen knife to my bedroom?" I laughed it off, but we were both annoyed. Brand new knife set, and we'd already lost one. We actually forgot about it until 4 days later when I was doing laundry. I opened the drawer where we kept clothespins and random laundry stuff, and there was the missing knife, right on top of everything. Both Jess and I swore we hadn't put it there. "Maybe one of us put it there when we were tired and forgot," I suggested, but it felt off. Neither of us could imagine a scenario where we'd absent-mindedly put a kitchen knife in the laundry drawer. We tried to laugh it off, but I noticed Jess double-checking that drawer before reaching in after that. About 2 weeks into living there, we started noticing other small things. Items would be in different places than where we left them. We'd close a cabinet door and later find it open. The bathroom door, which had a slight squeak, would sometimes open by itself in the middle of the night. We chalked it up to the house being old. Uneven floors, doors that don't latch properly. Old house quirks, right? Then came the first really unsettling incident. I woke up around 3 in the morning to get some water. As I walked past Jess's room, I heard what sounded like whispering. Her door was slightly ajar, and I figured she was on the phone or watching something on her laptop. But when I peeked in, she was fast asleep. The whispering stopped immediately when I pushed the door open wider. It had sounded like multiple voices having a conversation, but muffled, like they were trying to be quiet. I stood there for a solid minute, listening, but heard nothing else. When I mentioned it to Jess the next morning, she got really quiet. "I've been hearing that too," she finally admitted. "I thought it was you talking on the phone or something." We both tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe it was the neighbors, but the duplex was solidly built, and we rarely heard anything from the other unit. Pipes, radio interference, we grasped at anything that made sense. A few days after the whispering incident, I came home from work to find Jess looking pale and freaked out in the living room. "Something weird happened," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I was in the shower, and I swear someone knocked on the bathroom door. 3 distinct knocks. I called out thinking it was you, but then I remembered you were at work." "Maybe it was something falling," I suggested, not wanting to believe our house was actually creepy. "I got out and checked the whole place. Nothing had fallen, and nobody was here. I even checked outside." That was when we decided to get security cameras. Not because we thought the place was haunted, we were still in denial about that, but because we worried someone might have a key to our place, maybe a previous tenant or something. We got those Ring cameras for the front and back doors, plus a couple of indoor ones for the main living areas. My mom thought we were being paranoid, but agreed to split the cost with us. For about a week after installing the cameras, things were quiet. We started to relax, thinking maybe our presence in the house had been enough to deter whoever might have been messing with us. Then came the day I still have nightmares about. It was a Tuesday. I remember because both Jess and I had early shifts, so we left the house before 8 in the morning. We were both scheduled to be home around 4 in the afternoon. I got home first at around 4:15 and noticed Jess's car wasn't there yet. I went inside, tossed my bag on the couch, and headed to my room to change out of my work clothes. As I passed Jess's room, I glanced in and froze. There, in the middle of her perfectly made bed, was a dead rat. But not just dead. This thing was decomposed, mangled, with its insides partially spilling out. It looked like it had been dead for weeks. I screamed and backed away, fumbling for my phone to call Jess. She answered on the 3rd ring. "There's a dead rat on your bed," I blurted out. "A really disgusting one, like rotting." "What, are you serious?" She sounded as shocked as I felt. "I made my bed this morning. There was nothing there." "Well, it's here now, and it's horrific. Don't touch it. I'll be home in 10 minutes. I went outside to wait for her, too freaked out to stay in the house alone. When she pulled up, we went in together and checked her room. The rat was exactly as I'd found it, putrid and definitely placed there deliberately. It wasn't like it had crawled there and died. It had been positioned right in the center of her bed. "Check the cameras," Jess said, her voice tight with fear. We pulled up the footage on my laptop. According to the cameras, no one had entered or left the house between the time we left in the morning and when I got home. The indoor cameras showed nothing unusual, no movement in the living room or hallway other than my arrival. "This is impossible," I whispered. "Someone had to have put it there." We searched the entire house, looking for any sign of entry, a broken window, a jimmied door. Nothing. Everything was locked and secure. Jess called her dad, who came over with gloves and a garbage bag to remove the rat. He suggested it might have crawled in through a vent or something, but we all knew that didn't explain how it ended up perfectly centered on a made bed. That night, neither of us wanted to stay there, so we went to my parents' house. My mom thought we were overreacting, but my dad seemed concerned. He came over the next day and installed additional locks on all the doors and windows. We returned to the duplex feeling slightly safer but still on edge. Jess stripped her bed and washed everything twice. We sage-smudged the entire house, something Jess's aunt had suggested, opened all the windows, and tried to convince ourselves that the rat incident was just a bizarre one-time thing. It wasn't. 3 days later, we were both home watching TV when all the faucets in the house turned on simultaneously. Kitchen sink, bathroom sink, bathtub, all running full blast. We ran around turning them off, both of us shaking. "This isn't normal," Jess said, stating the obvious. "Houses don't do this." The very next morning, I woke up to find every cabinet door and drawer in the kitchen wide open. The cameras showed nothing. That same day, Jess's hairbrush ended up in the freezer. She swore she'd left it on her dresser. The final straw came about 2 weeks after the rat incident. I was home alone, working on my laptop at the kitchen table. I got up to get a glass of water and noticed something strange on the wall by the back door. When I got closer, I realized it was a handprint, but not a normal one. It was smaller than an adult's hand, but bigger than a child's, with unnaturally long fingers, and it appeared to be made with some kind of dark, oily substance. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I took a picture with my phone, then grabbed my keys and left immediately. I called Jess from my car and told her not to go home. When she saw the picture, she agreed. We needed to get out of that house. We stayed at my parents' place that night and went back the next day with my dad to pack some essentials. The handprint was gone, not cleaned off. There wasn't even a smudge or residue. It had completely vanished. That was when my mom finally took us seriously. She agreed to let us break our lease and helped us find a new apartment across town. We moved out within the week, leaving behind most of the furniture because we didn't want to bring whatever was in that house with us. The weirdest part? The day we moved out, as I was doing a final walkthrough to make sure we hadn't forgotten anything important, I went into the kitchen and found all 6 knives from our rose gold set laid out in a perfect circle on the counter. They were arranged with the blades pointing inward, forming a star pattern. I know for a fact we had packed those knives 2 days earlier. I specifically remember wrapping each one in newspaper and putting them in a box labeled "Kitchen." I didn't tell Jess. I just grabbed them, threw them in a garbage bag, and tossed it in a dumpster 3 blocks away. It's been 5 months since we moved out. My mom rented the duplex to a new tenant last month. I haven't warned them about what happened because honestly, what would I say? Watch out for teleporting knives and dead rats that appear out of nowhere. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear whispering. Jess says the same thing happens to her. We've both mostly convinced ourselves it was all just a series of weird coincidences and overactive imaginations. But deep down, I know what we experienced was real. And sometimes when I'm alone in our new apartment, I'll notice something small out of place. A book on a different shelf, a cup moved from where I left it, and I wonder if whatever was in that duplex followed us after all. Story 21. I've never shared this with anyone besides my closest friend, but it's been 3 months since it happened and I still can't make sense of it. I thought writing it out might help me process what the hell I experienced that day. I've lived in Ridgecrest for about 4 years now. It's a small mountain town where not much happens, which is exactly why I moved here after finishing college. The quiet and the mountain air helps with my anxiety, and I've always been drawn to places where you can actually see the stars at night. That particular day started normally enough. It was a Tuesday in early March, and I had the day off from my job at the local library. I'd been feeling pretty tired lately, working extra shifts to cover for a co-worker on maternity leave, so I decided to take an afternoon nap around 2 o'clock. I should mention that I've experienced astral projection before. For those who don't know what that is, it's basically when your consciousness or spirit separates from your physical body. Most people think it's just some new age nonsense, and maybe it is, but I've had these experiences since I was a teenager. Usually they happen when I'm extremely tired or stressed, and I have very little control over them. They're usually brief, disorienting, and honestly a bit scary. So there I was, lying on my bed with the blinds drawn, just starting to drift off. My cat, Mochi, was curled up at my feet as usual. I remember focusing on my breathing, trying to relax my body, when I felt that familiar sensation beginning, a kind of vibrating feeling and a high-pitched ringing in my ears, but this time was different. I hadn't even fallen asleep yet when I felt myself rising, like my body was getting lighter and lighter until I just sort of floated up. It wasn't gradual either. 1 second I was on my bed, and the next I was looking down at myself from the ceiling. I could see Mochi still curled up, completely unaware that anything weird was happening. Then, without any warning, my surroundings completely changed. Instead of floating in my bedroom, I was suddenly above a wilderness road at night. It was completely dark except for the stars above and a sliver of moon. The road was winding through dense forest, and I was moving along it rapidly, like I was being pulled by something. I wasn't controlling my movement at all. The strangest part was that I knew it was only around 2:15 in the afternoon back in Ridgecrest, but here it was definitely nighttime. The air felt colder too, and I could smell pine trees and damp earth. I've had out-of-body experiences before, but never anything like this. Usually I just float around my room or maybe my house for a minute or two before snapping back. I've never been transported somewhere else entirely, and I've definitely never had this level of sensory detail. The smells, the temperature, everything felt so real. As I was being pulled along this road, I started to get frustrated. If I was going to have this experience, I at least wanted some say in where I was going. So I spoke out loud, or whatever the equivalent is when you don't have a physical body, and said, "I know I'm astral projecting again. Can I please be in control this time?" To my complete surprise, it worked. I felt whatever force was pulling me slow down, and then I was gently placed on the ground. My feet touched the dirt road, and I could feel the texture of it. I looked down and could see a sort of translucent version of my body. I was wearing the same clothes I'd been napping in, a pair of grey sweatpants and an old university t-shirt. For a few minutes, I just walked along the road, testing what I could do. I found I could move in any direction and even tried floating up again, which worked. It was actually starting to be kind of fun, this newfound control. I remember thinking that if this was what astral projection could be like, maybe it wasn't so scary after all. That thought barely had time to form before everything shifted again. The forest road disappeared and I was back in my bedroom. But I wasn't back in my body. I was still projecting, floating a few feet above myself. I could see my physical body lying on the bed, Mochi still at my feet. The room looked exactly as I'd left it, blinds drawn, the glass of water on my nightstand, my phone charging next to it. This is where things started to get really unsettling. I tried to return to my body, thinking the experience was over, but I couldn't. Instead, I found myself lying down in a sort of spirit form, parallel to my physical body. It was like I was lying on an invisible bed right next to my real one. I couldn't move much in this position, which reminded me of sleep paralysis, something else I've experienced before, but this was different. With sleep paralysis, you're actually in your body, but can't move. Here, I was clearly separate from my physical form. That's when I noticed him. Standing on the side of my bed was a man I'd never seen before. He was completely bald, unnaturally pale, and wearing blue scrubs like a nurse or doctor might wear. He was just standing there, watching me, not my spirit form, but my actual body on the bed. My first thought was that I was having a break-in, but something felt off about him. He didn't seem solid somehow, and he was paying no attention to Mochi, who should have been going crazy if a stranger was in the room. The cat was still peacefully sleeping. Fear shot through me, but also anger. This was my space, my home. I don't know where I found the courage, but I shouted at him, "What the fuck?" The man's reaction was what really chilled me. He looked shocked, not at being caught in my bedroom, but at being seen. His eyes widened, and he took a step back, like he couldn't believe I was addressing him. I pressed on, demanding, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" My voice sounded different in this state, echoey and distant, but still forceful. He didn't answer. Instead, he started backing toward my bedroom door, making these placating gestures with his hands, like he was trying to calm me down. "Get out!" I yelled. "You're not welcome here." This is where it gets even weirder. The man actually bowed to me, like a full-on respectful bow, as he continued backing out. And as he bowed, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The space where the top half of his body had been was just black. Not empty, not transparent, but a dense shadow-like blackness that seemed to fill the space he'd occupied. As he straightened up, his form became normal again, and he slipped out through my bedroom door without opening it. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear, but also felt strangely powerful. I'd confronted whatever this entity was and made it leave. On impulse, I decided to test my control again and willed myself to rise from the parallel position I'd been in. It worked. I floated up and around the room, looking down at my physical body still on the bed. Mochi finally stirred, lifting her head and looking directly at where my spirit form was floating. She made this weird chittering sound she sometimes makes at birds outside the window. Then the familiar panic set in, the fear that if I stayed out of my body too long, I might not be able to get back in, that I might die. In previous astral projections, returning to my body had been difficult and frightening, like being sucked back through a too small opening. But this time, when I willed myself to return, I simply floated down and merged with my physical form smoothly, like sliding into a warm bath. A few moments later, I was able to open my physical eyes. My room looked normal. The door was closed. Mochi was staring at me with that intense cat gaze they sometimes have. I checked my phone. Only about 30 minutes had passed since I'd lain down for my nap. I got up immediately and checked the entire house, looking for any sign of an intruder. Nothing was disturbed. All doors and windows were locked from the inside. I even checked outside for footprints or any evidence someone had been near my house. Nothing. The whole experience has left me deeply unsettled. It wasn't like any astral projection I'd had before. The control I had, the vividness of the sensations, and especially the man in blue scrubs. Who or what was he? Why was he watching me? Was he some kind of spirit or entity, a hallucination, another astral traveler? What bothers me most is how normal he looked, not like a demon or monster, just a regular man in medical scrubs. And when I confronted him, he didn't seem threatening. He seemed almost pathetic, deferential even. But that shadow where his upper body had been when he bowed, that wasn't normal. I've tried researching similar experiences online, but nothing quite matches what I went through. I've also been afraid to take naps since then, worried I might see him again. Sometimes I feel like I'm being watched, especially when I'm falling asleep. The strangest part is that I don't feel like this entity meant me harm. It felt more like he was observing me, studying me, like I caught him in the middle of some kind of examination. I still don't know what to make of any of this. Was it just a particularly vivid hallucination, some kind of waking dream, or did I actually encounter something from beyond our normal reality? And if so, what does it want with me? All I know is that it felt absolutely real in the moment, and I can't shake the memory of those surprised eyes when he realized I could see him, as if he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. I haven't had another astral projection since that day, which is unusual for me. It's like whatever happened scared that part of me away. Sometimes I wonder if I should try to induce another projection to see if I can find answers. But then I remember the man in blue scrubs and that shadow-like void where his body should have been, and I decide maybe some questions are better left unanswered.